Welcome back to Travolting. Hosted by Jeff Sweeney and Stuart Elmore. Covering the taking of Pelham 1, 2, 3. With special guest Cole Bradley. Enjoy the episode.
Hi, Jeff.
Hi, Stuart.
Hi, Cole.
Hi.
Stuart just made an executive decision because we started talking about the movie.
Yeah,
he said,
yeah.
He said, I'm hitting the record button.
We just needed to start recording right away, or else we were gonna lose all the talk.
Yeah.
But the conversation we were talking about before we hopped in was I did not take any notes on this movie.
Yes, you did not. I did.
Yeah, you did. Cole did.
I also did.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. By the way, Cole, hi. It's great to see you on this podcast. Joined via Zoom call.
Yes, I'm excited.
Yeah.
I have been looking forward to showing up here and talking about the best John Travolta movie.
Where are you calling in from?
Brooklyn.
Brooklyn. Oh,
yes, a basement of Brooklyn.
Let me tell you something. Let me tell you something.
Oh shit! There it is. Fucking hell.
New York is the greatest fucking city in the world.
Yeah.
Jeff, I'm gonna tell you something that is probably gonna get cut out.
Go on.
I'm in a very Jamaican neighborhood of Brooklyn.
Well, it's the greatest city in the world for some reasons. I'll park a bus up your ass sideways.
I mean, so we are joined here by Cole to talk about
the taking of Pelham
1, 2, 3.
Not 4.
Not
That was
5.
terrible. I'm sorry.
Which, watching it today, I was starting to wonder if maybe it should be. I know they say 1, 2, 3 in the movie, but shouldn't it maybe be the taking of Pelham 123?
Yeah, it absolutely should.
Because it's based off the time it departs from the station.
But the novel is written out, and the original movie is written out 1, 2, 3 in words, not in numbers.
And that's the thing that's slightly is that in the movie they say both ways.
Yeah.
At multiple points, Denzel says 123, and then he says 1, 2, 3 next.
Yeah.
So 1, 2, 3 is more fun to say.
Yeah, it is.
Just because it makes less sense, so it's more fun to say taking of Pelham 1, 2, 3.
We're going to jump right into the context with this little comment I want to make, but this is directed by Tony Scott, Ridley Scott's brother. Do you want to know another movie he made?
I'm sure Cole has seen it.
Are you talking about Unstoppable?
Unstoppable. Which, Cole, what is Unstoppable about, and who is its main star?
It's a Denzel. It's the third in the trilogy.
Wait, there's a trilogy?
Yes, there's a trilogy
of Denzel train
Unstoppable.
movies?
There's a trilogy, and I consider them a trilogy because they're both baton passes from Deja Vu to Pelham. And then from Pelham to Unstoppable, because Unstoppable and Pelham are both Denzel works in trains and is dealing with an issue with a train, and Deja Vu and Pelham, are both action movies that are predicated about what if Denzel Washington was sitting at a desk for the entire movie while all the actual drama was happening on the other side of a screen in a phone call.
Oh my God.
Which is what Deja Vu. Have you guys seen Deja Vu?
Not in a long time.
Side Deja Vu corner. The premise of Deja Vu.
Holy shit.
No, because I think it's important to discuss what's going on formally in Pelham. Is to understand what Tony Scott had just done with Deja Vu, one of the great American movies. Fucking love Deja Vu. The premise of Deja Vu is that a terrorist attack has happened. But there is a technology that lets them look into the past. Mm-hmm. So Denzel Washington is the cop investigating this terrorist attack. He can't change the past, but he can watch the past. So for a good chunk of the movie, until it gets a little fuzzy with all that, he's looking at things that have already happened. And it's kind of the source code thing of like wanting to change it, but the limits of the technology and time means that he can't. Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's kind of like Rear Window in that way. It's very Rear Window.
So, Stuart.
Yeah.
I want to sidebar to the context corner about this episode. So Cole was one of the first people I reached out to come on this podcast.
Yeah.
He was in the very list. Originally, he was going to do Blowout.
What?
With Mark.
Okay.
It was going to be a double-hander. And then Cole backed out to take this movie.
Really?
Well, I should say is that Jeff asked, like, what John Travolta movie do you want to be on? And I literally was just like, what are the ones I like? And I kind of just said Blowout as a stock. And then just making it sound like I backed out. I didn't. I don't think it even counts as backing out. It was 30 seconds later. I had to come to Jesus moment. I was like, oh, right. Blowout's the second best John Travolta movie. I want to be on the best John Travolta movie. I want to talk about Taking the Pelham 1, 2, 3. Who gives a shit about Blowout? Like, I love Blowout. Blowout's great. Sure,
we are 5
better
minutes.
Brian De Palma movies, but I want to talk about a late period Tony Scott masterpiece.
Wait, we are 5 minutes of this podcast, and we are already spewing blasphemy like Taking a Pelham is the best John Travolta movie?
Yeah, it's pretty obvious. Blowout is the only real competition.
Wait a minute. Wait a minute.
Okay.
Hold on.
I've been looking forward to this episode because Cole and I are good friends, and he talks a lot about Tony Scott and his admiration for the man. And so
one of the great directors of the post-war era.
And that we were going to have this guy on to talk about not only a John Travolta movie, but Tony Scott. I knew this was going to be special.
Unstoppable God. Is also a great movie. And Denzel's incredible movie. And Unstoppable.
I mean,
what's a better John Travolta movie?
Blowout. Pulp Fiction.
Maybe.
Perfect.
Denzel Washington is not in Blowout. I think that's what tips the scales for me.
But I think to go even further, I don't think this is a true John Travolta movie. It's a Denzel movie.
It's a two-hander.
Well, but Travolta's just in it, and he's the bad guy.
He's pretty good in it, though.
He's in it more than Shaw is in the original.
The original film.
The original is not a two-hander. This is a full-on two-hander. And I would, in fact, argue that this movie is, in a lot of ways, about the idea of a movie being a two-hander.
Mm-hmm.
That so much of the juice of this movie is in the kind of metatextual idea of it being a Denzel Travolta movie, as opposed to Unstoppable, which is Denzel and also Pine.
Yeah.
But also that doesn't matter. This is a movie about the way movie stars relate to each other on camera.
I love that take.
Oh
it's what
and
we
no
are,
and no.
We are
we're gonna dive
10
into
minutes
this.
into this podcast. Oh
Okay.
my God. Let's go to the context corner. We got to go to the...
Before we get into the meat of it. So I did not have a lot of time to do a huge amount of research for this movie, I will admit. Cole, you might know a little more, but this is based on a novel. And that's the context. No, I'm kidding.
Oh, really?
No, I'm kidding. It's based on a novel by John Gotti. Gotti? How do you say it? Godey. Would that be Gotti?
Goaty.
A Goaty?
Goaty, probably.
Goaty?
Yeah,
Okay,
yeah.
I was really hoping it was John
I knew
Gotti.
a Goaty who was spelled very similarly to that.
But it's based on that novel, and also in some way a original feature film called The Taking of Pelham 1, 2, 3, but 1, 2, and 3 were spelled out in the original film, which was a Joseph Sargent film starring Walter Matthau and Robert Shaw. And there was also a TV film, apparently, that does not have an image on Wikipedia, and thereby probably
Does not exist.
Does not exist.
The TV movie that I always forget exists until I'm on the Wikipedia page for either this one or the Walter Matthau.
Wait a second. This 1998, it stars Edward James Olmos, Vincent D'Onofrio, and Richard Schiff.
Yep.
What the fuck?
And Donnie Wahlberg.
Donnie Wahlberg. Oh, God.
And Lorraine Bracco, because she was with Edward James Olmos
at
that time. I don't know if they're still together. I just found out that they were a couple, or are a couple, maybe.
Interesting. So this, I'm so unprepared for this context corner, but we're going into it. We're going
into it.
And so, sometime around 2005, 2006ish, The idea was, thrust into the void of remaking the original film / doing a new adaptation of the novel. The original screenplay was written by David Cope, or Coep, however.
I think it's Kep, actually.
Kep? Is it Kep?
I think it is Kep.
I think it's Kep.
Is it Koep?
Yes.
Yeah,
it's
Kep.
David Kep.
It's Kep.
Who wanted to dive into it as reimagining the original story in a post 9/11 world. And like the upgrades of surveillance technology and the police state and whatnot, and kind of diving more into that aspect of the story.
Right. That makes sense.
Which I think is there in this movie.
Oh, 100%.
It's just the Tony Scott thing where he's never gonna have anyone say that's what it is. Tony Scott is like the master of subtext. And I think this is very much a movie about post 9/11 New York and post 9/11 NYPD in particular.
Tony Scott's one of his great skills is that he makes these like hyper stylized action movies that on their face are just about like the story being told. And like you said, the subtext is very much embedded in the actions of the characters and in the actions of just the filmmaking itself, instead of any character ever talking about it.
I think the thing that trips people up with him a lot is that his movies are so narratively upbeat and happy, and they have happy endings, and they're about very, upstanding heroes triumphing. And that's what they're about on a narrative level. But I feel like with basically every Tony Scott movie, the second you like sit down and think about it, it's like the most cynical movie.
Yeah, they're deeply
anyone's
sad.
ever made. I think about him a lot as like the nightmare like flip of Michael Mann, because Michael Mann's movies are much more grotesque and ugly and nihilistic on their face, but there's like that beating heart of the romantic behind him. Whereas Tony Scott like doesn't even believe in a world to dream about. He's just, everything is just ugly and base and grotesque, and he's just putting in like an ironic smile on it.
Yes. Because this movie ostensibly...
I don't know. I really haven't had any interest or deep down fondness of Tony Scott. Like, again, I vaguely remember Deja Vu. I have seen Taking...
Have you seen Unstoppable?
I have seen Unstoppable.
That's a movie with some juice to it.
It's got a little bit of juice to it. Yeah, I don't disagree. Like
Unstoppable was a movie where my dad just randomly one day was like, "There's this new train movie I want to go see." Brought my whole family to go see Unstoppable.
I mean, I will say like Tony Scott, just based on what I can remember, which is very vague. So people can disagree with me on this, but it feels very Clint Eastwood directorial-esque, like a Clint Eastwood directed movie. I draw attention to. Well, there's another Taking of Train movie that Clint Eastwood did that wasn't very good.
The 1517
to
Paris.
No one has seen. You cannot prove to me that that's a movie that exists.
Right. No, but then there's also the what was the Atlanta bomber movie? Like the
Richard Jewell.
Richard Jewell. I felt thinking about Unstoppable and watching Richard Jewell, I got very similar like heroic actions and
movies about simple Americans in extraordinary circumstances.
Yeah, absolutely.
Ordinary people in extraordinary circumstances.
And I feel like that has Clint Eastwood's name all over it for a plethora of reasons. Oh.
Yeah, no, I actually think the late period Clint thing isn't that off the mark. And I know a lot of people make the argument for Clint that I make for Tony. My difference is that I watch something like Richard Jewell and I watch something like Sully, and I'm like, this is like 40% of the way
to what it needs to be.
Yeah, like there's a version of Richard Jewell that I know people have argued for Richard Jewell being that it's this like deeply cynical movie about how evil the police are. And that's there in Richard Jewell. American Sniper is like flirting a little with being like
the horrific
an anti-imperialist movie about how soldiers are serial killers.
Yeah.
But those are like hints that I feel like Clint is too ultimately lazy and jingoistic to actually care about. Because he is lazy. Clint Eastwood is lazy. That's his whole reputation.
That is
he's a one take champ.
8-hour days.
Yeah, whereas Tony to me is like, if Tony had made Richard Jewell, which fucking hell. If Tony makes Richard Jewell, it's that movie. If Tony makes American Sniper, it is that movie. And I feel like Clint and I also feel like Ridley are both really in these late phases like trying to move into the territory of narratives that Tony Scott was working in. But they just don't have the juice. They're not real artists.
They don't have the panache.
Yeah. They're not, they don't have the black heart of Tony Scott.
Wow.
Stuart looks like he was just shelled.
I'm like, well, it's like, Mary Grace came in for Look Who's Talking, and that was a great episode, but we had that one moment. We had that one moment with the Scientology bit, and that shook me a lot.
Yeah.
But Cole, I feel like every 5 minutes you're bringing out some sort of bit that's just like, the fuck?
It's shaking you to your
shaking
core.
me to the core. We're only 15 minutes of this podcast. I feel like I've been on here for an hour already. Yeah. Just
the thing that unlocked Tony for me, and this is what I always try to tell people, is Days of Thunder, which is a movie I think is great. I know a lot of people don't like, is kind of on its face a very straightforward, sports movie. Asshole learns to play nice and play for the game, not for money, with cars. But like almost at the very beginning of that movie, during the opening credits, there's a quick 3-shot sequence, because the opening credits are people like tailgating outside a NASCAR race. And there's a quick 3-shot sequence of the American flag, the Confederate flag, and a Coca-Cola flag. And to me, that's Tony Scott. It's like, I'm going to make a hard in your throat, inspirational sports movie, but I'm going to thread it with this idea of like America, racism, and commerce are entirely intertwined, and that it's this rot that is just the foundation on top of which Tom Cruise's driving is an inherently corrupt, evil thing. I'm sorry, Stuart.
I mean, like, I can't disagree with you, Cole.
The thing is, Cole is absolutely correct.
I can't disagree with any of this because of my lack of knowledge and insight into Tony Scott, which you're making a really good case for me to like do a directorial study on him.
I think
one of the best Tarantino movie.
True Romance.
True Romance, baby.
And one of the things about Tony Scott that I find very interesting is the movie stars he chooses to work with.
Oh my God, yes.
Like the fact that he has a Tom Cruise phase. He eventually segues into a late stage Denzel phase. He works with Denzel for 10 years, roughly.
He works, not only does he have a Tom Cruise phase, but he's really the only guy who makes action movies with Tom Cruise.
Yeah.
In the 20th century.
Yes.
It's really the Tom Cruise action movies in the 20th century are really just, I'm sure I'm forgetting something, but Days of Thunder, Top Gun, and The First Mission.
Yes, because the rest of them he's doing
but
dramas.
He does that. He works with, Denzel, obviously, all this stuff. And he's also seeding in the Denzel stuff. He's like trying to make other stars with like Chris Pine in Unstoppable. I've already said, I will say my piece further about what I think the relationship between Denzel and Travolta in this is. He tries to make Keira Knightley an action star, which is one of the great what ifs in Hollywood history, I think, if people had seen and appreciated Domino. He's the only person brave enough to put Robert Redford and Brad Pitt in a movie together. He made a sequel to The Conversation as a Will Smith vehicle, as like a straight down the line, like, let me make Will Smith a kick-ass action star vehicle. He uses Gene Hackman's juice to try to make Will Smith pop more, and it works.
I think I just need to take my headphones off and to just like
walk into the ocean,
step away from the table. I think I don't know what I could contribute to this episode anymore.
No, you're staying here and you're learning.
Let's talk about the movie.
No.
Well,
Jeff, you wanted to say something about the stars, I think.
Yeah.
Sorry, I cut you off.
Oh no, it's all good. I was segueing into you. So the thing about that, I find it like, as you were saying, he's the guy who does the Tom Cruise action vehicles during the 80s and the 90s period. And the fact that he's basically, when it comes to Denzel, he's, as far as I can remember, the only guy really doing genre vehicles with Denzel around this time.
I feel like there's something I'm forgetting, because obviously Training Day, this is all in like the shadow of Training Day. Because
like right after, because there's Training Day, and then after that, I'm looking at it right now, he does stuff that's like genre adjacent, like American Gangster, Inside Man, whatnot. But aside from the Tony Scott films, the only other genre thing he does in that time is The Book of Eli. But
Because he doesn't do Two Guns until Tony's dead.
Yeah, because he does after Training Day. It's John Q, Antoine Fisher, Out of Time.
Out of Time is a genre film.
Mm-hmm.
It's unfortunately not very good.
Tragic. I mean, I'm looking at the poster
that's him
now.
Reuniting with Carl Franklin, who did Devil in a Blue Dress with Denzel.
Is it it's not a sequel, okay.
No.
But he pretty much there's a 10-year period where he's pretty much just doing Tony Scott genre films and the occasional Spike Lee or Ridley Scott film.
Well, but also Inside Man is, I mean, I'm not trying to take this away at all from Spike. Inside Man is very much a Spike Lee film, but Inside Man is kind of like Spike Lee doing a Tony Scott movie in a lot of ways. It's a very high octane and tense and built around movie stars in a way that a lot of Spike Lee movies aren't if they aren't Denzel.
Yeah.
This movie feels a lot, Pelham, I mean, feels a lot like Tony responding to Inside Man and the idea of Denzel as, put upon hostage negotiator who's over his head.
That's actually I heard
no, keep going.
No.
Keep going.
Yes.
How does Travolta fit into this fray though?
That's where my long segue was heading to.
Sorry.
No. This is good. This is the juice.
Because I will say I vastly care about Tony Scott and Denzel Washington far more than I care about John Travolta. I'm sorry, Jeff.
No, it's fine. It's fine. You can be wrong about some things. I think you've mostly been right, but I think you can be wrong about you're allowed to be wrong about that. But no, it's the interesting thing to me, aside from Denzel, is the way this is simultaneously a reinvention of Travolta that kind of pushes him into this third era that we started today, which, sidebar for the listener at home, you may have noticed new theme music this episode. We just listened to our retrospective. This is officially the beginning of the Travolta exploitation era.
Yeah.
However, we have said very much we regret making it so at the beginning of this.
I've been wanting to ask you why this and not From Paris with Love is the transition.
So back at the very beginning, we kind of made the transition points, and we got to the point too late where we realized this was the wrong spot to put it. But we'd already recorded episodes coming out after this, and
fair enough.
We kind of done all the work already, so we just kind of had to stick with it. But I think this and the film we talk about next week that we recorded 7 years ago, Old Dogs, are the real ending of the A-list era. But I think they're transition films.
They are transition films, and I think we said this in our recap era episode that Old Dogs particularly is very transitional because it's the beginning, it's the end of his Disney deal.
Old Dogs is what kills his Disney kills future John Travolta vehicles after Old Dogs flops.
But also, and I had this thought earlier today that I wish I had thought of when we did the Hairspray episode. But Hairspray, you said this very clearly, Jeff, that Travolta's performance as Ed Turnblad in Hairspray is good. It's a good performance. And Hairspray is not a
very good performance.
And Hairspray is not a bad movie. It's actually a pretty good movie, depending on, it fits a certain type of audience. But in all fairness, I think with that type of audience, it really resonates with them to this day. To this day, people who liked that movie back then still like it now.
Because it's a masterpiece, yes.
Good movie.
Hairspray is Travolta's second blowout.
Yeah. Well, third, if we count Battlefield Earth.
Well, no.
Yes.
No.
No. Yes.
No.
Yes.
No.
Yes.
Battlefield Earth is not underrated in any fashion, shape, or form. It is correctly rated as being terrible.
What if it was pretty good? No, I'm kidding.
What do you mean by second blowout? Because I'm thinking
Blowout was the film.
You said blowout as it flopped, and if it hadn't flopped, everything is different.
Oh, hear me out on this, because you're right in saying that. But Blowout came out. It came out for the wrong audience.
Yeah,
and that's what killed it. It's because Blowout came out after the darkness of the 70s, during the beginning of the bright-eyed America's the Best Reagan era, and people didn't like that the movie ended in a sad way, and people who watched it didn't like it, didn't go see it a second time, and they spread the word that this is a movie you may want to avoid because it's dark and depressing.
Yes,
and that's what killed it. and that's what killed John Travolta's career in the 80s.
Well,
Now, fast forward.
What killed his career is that made him scared, and then he made bad choices right after that killed his career.
Yes.
And so
you had thrown out, I think it was you, Jeff. It might have been you, Stuart. I'm sorry. But I think in the Blood episode, you said something about like, what if he had taken supporting roles?
Yes.
After Blowout, his career is completely different.
Yes.
And I think about that a lot.
Yeah. But to finish my point, but fast forward to Hairspray. This is coming out in just before Obama gets elected, not even taken office. This is before the 2008 election. It's not 2007. So we're like well deep into, the two-term Bush era America.
Yeah.
And here's the thing, because the LGBTQ community, which for awful as it is, has been like, I feel like in the 2000s, like the fight, it always been a fight like earlier than that, like in the 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s. But I feel like it really got its footing in the early 2000s up until the Supreme Court ruled, same-sex marriage to be completely constitutional in all 50 states in 2013. And in 2007, in the early 2000s to mid-2000s, just right around the 2010 era, there was like the backlash behind it.
Yeah.
This is where we get like the whole thing with like the post-Civil War statues that get built up as Black people try to fight for the civil rights, that people think, no, it's like, we're going to build these Civil War statues to remind you guys who's on top.
Yeah.
Fast forward to 2007, and we can all agree on this, right? We watch Wild Hogs, and like people weren't as they didn't care as much of making a point about homophobia in the 90s, 80s, 70s, and 60s. I mean, yeah, there were some films that were like, oh, he's gay, he should go to prison or be medicated or whatever. But it wasn't so much in the early 2000s. It was
gay jokes in
comedies. And it was all about that, like, bashing about, like, oh, my God, he's gay. This is so weird. Like, again, Travolta's going to do at least two of those. He's probably done more, but like Wild Dogs, Old Dogs, all movies that are about like, ha ha ha, he's gay movies.
Yeah.
And Hairspray came out right in the fucking center of that.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I feel like if that movie came out 4 years ago, 2016, 2017, would it have worked? I mean, there's a lot of things here, but like, would it have worked exactly as well? Maybe, maybe not. But would it have had the same amount of homophobia backlash that it got back when it actually originally came out? I don't think so. And I don't think it would have caused such a major backlash for Travolta to not be taken seriously, which we established.
Yes.
And that's why I think Hairspray is Travolta's second blowout.
I mean, I think you're maybe giving it a little too little credit for people taking that seriously. He came pretty close to an Oscar nomination for that.
He came. Here's the thing.
It was probably 7 or 8.
Yeah, so the problem was with Hairspray is not the Academy version of it. It's in a general consciousness, and we both talked about this with our own parents. Right after that movie came out, the general, like, if you mention John Travolta to...
he's a joke.
He's a joke.
Yeah, fair.
He played a woman in that movie.
And I don't think the same would have been true if this movie came out 4 years ago.
Yeah, or even 2 years after.
Yeah.
Because
2 years after, that's a huge difference.
If it came out in
2011,
2011, he would have been called brave on every news outlet. And every news outlet would have been saying, look at John Travolta, the guy who's been the heartthrob, the charismatic guy who's putting himself into this very vulnerable state, but like being a very large woman.
And I very much don't think it's... there's a very clear correlation with John Travolta generally becoming a joke in popular culture right around the time Hairspray comes out.
Yeah, I agree.
Because he gets out of joke territory in the 90s.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. He starts sliding back into it with Battlefield Earth, but he's still doing like things that people are like, oh yeah, John Travolta, he's whatever. It's not until Hairspray that like he fully becomes a joke again.
Yeah.
And then this movie is... reeling it back, is Tony Scott, in a sense, trying to reinvent Travolta again. But I think the way he does it inadvertently sets Travolta up for his 2010s run.
All of this to say, I don't think we should be super hard on ourselves for making this the turning point into the third era, because I do think with all of those elements combined with Hairspray, with Bolt being his last ever truly A-list movie.
It's the last time he gets top billing in a successful movie.
Yeah.
For a while.
I do think taking a Pelham, Cole's going to make the case it's the best movie ever made, but like
and you'd be right about it.
Yeah. I do think it deserves some of the, I don't want to even say bad credit or negative credit, but for being that like transitionary moment for what Travolta's going to do in the future.
I think the only thing I would say, because if I'm right, it's Pelham, Old Dogs, Paris, right?
Yeah.
Yes.
See, to me, Paris is the start of the next era. And I think the reason is that Pelham and Old Dogs are the last attempts, even if they're both flops.
Mm-hmm.
They're the last attempts of Travolta being a leading man in A pictures.
Yes.
And because there's a huge difference between being the second lead in Taking a Pelham 1, 2, 3, coming out in the middle of the summer, playing second fiddle to Denzel Washington, and top lining, basically shifting into the Liam Neeson mode of top lining a smaller winter action movie.
And you just said
I feel like once you're in the Liam Neeson mode, no disrespect to Liam Neeson, but once you've hit that phase of like, I'm going to star in a $10 million February programmer, you're never getting back to A-list status ever again.
But you just said it though, that like Tony, and you just said it as well, Jeff, that like Tony Scott's trying to reinvent Travolta. And I think about the movie Taken with Liam Neeson, that on paper, that movie sounds like it's going to be a joke. Liam Neeson, who at the time, 2000, what year did that come out?
2006.
2008.
2008? I thought it was 6.
2008, I think, right?
I think you're right.
Well,
I think I'm
Taking
wrong.
Pelham came out 2008.
9.
9?
9.
Fucking hell.
Stuart, how are you even on this podcast?
So, but Liam Neeson at the time is already well into like his 50s, right?
60s.
60s?
Isn't he?
No, he's younger. He's in his 50s. He's about to turn 70 right now.
With Blacklight, the best
Blacklight,
movie of the year.
They're going to need more men. They're going to need more men.
He has to take down the entire Federal Bureau of Investigation.
Like, and I felt like Taken on paper looks like you're going to cast Liam Neeson, who like in his 50s is going to be like this rough, gritty action star. Now, I will say the trailer made it look pretty cool. That the Taken trailer is actually pretty decent. But on paper, just like the poster and just like if someone gave you the elevator pitch of Taken, it's like, I don't want to see 50-year-old Liam Neeson kick bad guy's ass in Paris. And
you don't? I do.
I mean, we do now because we saw Taken and we saw how amazing that is.
Okay. So
Taken's barely a
But
real
what my point I'm trying to get to tie it all up is because I think if what happened to Liam Neeson in Taken, which is like, oh shit, yeah, this guy can be a badass in badass movies, and it extended his life a few years. Now, granted, I do agree though, Cole, that like Liam Neeson has gone down to that level of February programmers, but I do think Taken like boosted him at least a couple years.
The distinction with Neeson is that because Taken is a February program.
Yeah,
but it's a good
February
programmer.
The February programmer too, that all other February programmers want to be. The thing is that Neeson was not a leading man before he made Taken. He was like a respected thespian. He wasn't a movie star.
Like he would do prior to that, like Schindler's List, The Phantom Menace, all those movies. Like he may be top billed, like he may be the lead, but it's like, is he the main? Is he like the movie star anchoring that movie?
He's not the lead of a summer blockbuster.
Yeah.
Travolta is, even if he wants to. And if you look at the other people who have followed the Neeson route, your Travoltas, your Cusacks,
Bruce Willis.
Willis's being, I think, the big one, even though he's doing it in really bare bones stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Like a lot of these people who are moving into your Charlize Theron's, a lot of these people who are moving into this like low to mid budget, like clean action movie territory, they're once movie stars who are trying to keep their career afloat. And I think there's a distinction between them and a Neeson who's only getting higher profile, that unless you're Keanu Reeves, once you make a movie like From Paris with Love, is that what it's called?
Yes, it is. From
Paris with Love.
From Paris with Love.
From Paris with Love. Once you make a movie like From Paris with Love, unless you're Keanu Reeves, you're never opening a summer blockbuster again, no matter who you used to be.
Mm-hmm. And so that's why I think From Paris to Love is the actual beginning of this era. We just we just already committed. And
That's fine. We just spent like 20 minutes talking about
Which
is what
I was about
which is
to say,
exactly what I want the show to be.
We are 35 minutes into this podcast.
I want this
and we have not started talking about the plot yet.
That's what I wanted. That's from the very beginning. That's what I wanted this podcast to be: is 4-hour episodes where we barely talk about the movie. No, but I think it is.
But I think it is like an important stage of a lot of people's careers, because very few people have managed to keep, a movie star career going for multiple decades.
Yeah.
And Travolta's a weird case, and I know you've talked about this, because he has the dip and then the comeback.
Mm-hmm.
And he kind of keeps that comeback writing for so long, but like at some point you can't headline an action movie anymore. Like, the only very few people have managed to keep like a 40-year plus run, which is really what we're almost talking about.
Yeah.
30, I guess, at this point for him. It's like Tom Cruise and
Leo, maybe.
Not even Leo. I'm blanking on her name. Oh my God. Hold on. Keep talking.
Okay.
Joan Crawford. Joan Crawford's the other one.
Okay.
Cruise and Crawford can keep it going. Everyone else, you do hit a point where you kind of look silly being the bad guy in an action movie, which is what I think this movie is kind of about.
Yeah. Okay. Should we dive into the movie itself?
I think it's time to.
You want to dive in?
Let's get into the movie itself.
Okay. The Taking of Pelham 1,
2,
3.
There we go. That's what I wanted. All right.
You got what you wanted.
I got what I wanted.
Now I can hit stop record,
No.
right?
So if I can just cut in here for a second,
Yes.
because this is just a thing me and Jeff talk about a lot. I do own this movie on Blu-ray.
He does.
It is the initially issued Blu-ray from when this movie just properly came out. Jeff, just so you know, the trailers on this Blu-ray are District 9 and Ron Howard's Angels and Demons.
Very good. Very good.
Wow. Wow, I'm so old.
Angels and Demons.
The sequel to...
Have you guys seen those movies?
Yes.
Absolutely not.
I've seen both of those movies.
Both?
I've seen...
Have you seen the third?
There's 3 of them.
There's 3.
Oh, I didn't know there was 3.
They made Inferno 10 years after Angels and Demons.
I did not see Inferno.
11.
Tom Hanks in that movie. It's so funny how like significantly different he looks, still like running down those, like doing the action scenes.
I mean, Angels
Inferno
and Demons
came out the same year as Sully.
Angels and Demons is the one where Ewan McGregor is a priest and he
becomes the
lifts up a nuke up into a helicopter, jumps off of it, and skydives back to Vatican City, and then gets elected the Pope, and then found out that he killed the former Pope.
He does put a nuke in a helicopter and then skydive down, and then the papal smoke rises, and they're like, "He's the Pope."
Then they find out he murdered the former Pope.
The previous Pope.
Yeah. Is it John Paul? Is it Benedict? We'll never know. All right, so the movie.
It would have been Francis. No, 2009 would have been Benedict.
I remember very specifically my parents having the Da Vinci Code copy, but they had the special definitive edition book where, like, every time Robert Langdon mentioned a piece of artwork, there would be, like, a gloss page with a picture of the artwork.
Oh, my God.
I think about that a lot.
All right, let's talk about this Gandolfini movie.
Okay. So this is what the sixth Gandolfini we've covered on this show.
Probably.
Is it?
We have covered, I believe, 6 Gandolfinis.
Get Shorty.
Even prior to, well, I'm bringing it up. Even prior to Get
Civil
Shorty.
Action.
No, he's in. Okay. So he is in.
A Civil Action is also not a movie that you can convince me exists.
I'm just gonna bring up James Gandolfini.
I think a Civil Action might surprise you, Cole. It surprised me.
It's a good movie.
It might be good if it was real. It's just not a real movie.
Okay.
It's a fake poster that someone walks by in a real movie.
I'm gonna grab something from my office in just a second here. But so Gandolfini has done Get Shorty, She's So Lovely,
Never seen.
A Civil Action, Lonely Hearts, Taking of Pelham. So 5 total.
He's not going to be in anything else, is he?
He is not. This is our last Gandolfini on this show, unfortunately.
Because he's only got 3 or 4 more movies after this, I think.
He has a good number. From
Really?
what I'm looking.
Give him to me.
He passes away in 2013.
2013. Enough said is his last movie, I think.
The Drop.
The Drop.
Tom Hardy.
Wow. Remember The Drop? That was supposed to be a big deal.
I remember the big deal was Gandolfini's going to get a posthumous Oscar for The Drop.
Isn't The Drop like an original, like, Michael Connelly script or something?
It is. I'm bringing it up right now.
Or what's his name? The guy who wrote Gone Baby Gone. I think The Drop is an original script.
It's written
by the novelist who wrote Gone Baby Gone and Live by Night.
It is absolutely an original. It's based on his 2009 short story.
Okay. What's his name? Not Michael Connelly.
Dennis
Michael Connelly's Bosch.
Dennis Lehane.
Yes.
So after this, Gandolfini has Where the Wild Things Are.
Maybe his best performance.
Welcome to the Rileys. Mint Julep, Down the Shore, Violet and Daisy, Killing Them Softly.
I've seen Violet and Daisy.
Not Fade Away, Zero Dark 30, The Incredible Burt Wonderstone, and then Enough Said The Drop are posthumous.
Well, I've seen like half of those. I've seen The Incredible Burt Wonderstone.
I am sorry.
I've seen Violet and Daisy.
Incredible. That's a Steve. That's
Steve Carell, Jim Carrey, magician.
Oh God,
magician.
I forgot about this.
All right. We got to get into the movie, guys.
We're good.
We're getting into the movie.
Gandolfini.
Look at this poster for The Incredible Burt
That's
Wonderstone.
Great. That's great. So the movie starts with a montage.
Really cashing a paycheck.
New York
City.
City.
1, 2, 3.
We are getting into. We're in New York.
We start out. No, we don't start out in New York. We start out in a small aspect ratio of New York. That then it starts pulsing, and then
it's not just pulsing.
It's growing like a train.
It's growing like what it looks like when you're in a train depot pulling out. That's what it's doing. Have you ever seen the beginning of James Gray's The Yards? It's like the exact same shot, except with just the aspect ratio growing. Do you get what I'm saying?
Yes.
That's what it is.
It's like you're coming out of a tunnel and it's getting big.
Yeah.
And so it grows out, and then it just pops out, and then
We're in New York.
We're in New York.
We're in New York.
Well, we're above New York, technically.
Yeah.
We're in a helicopter.
The greatest fucking city in the world.
Greatest fucking city
My
in the
world.
world.
My
New York
city.
#1. Yankees.
All right.
So the aspect ratio changes. And then I wrote I wrote the words handlebars, and I was like, why'd I write that? And then I remember one of the first shots after we're cutting around New York and we get a film by Tony Scott, et cetera, is we're just on a street corner, and in super fast, John Travolta walks up the camera, and then slow-mo walks past, and we get introduced to the look in this movie.
You're giving me that look like I should go straight to the hair ranking.
I'm giving you that look.
I think so.
All right.
I think it's time.
All right.
Cole, should I have my hand near that thing for this? Potentially.
Maybe.
Cue the hair ranking music now. Welcome to the hair ranking. I'm gonna make this really quick. I already put it somewhere.
Oh God!
Check the hair ranking music and tell the audience where I put it.
You didn't mean that you already put it in here. You already updated the list.
I already updated the list ahead of time. Where did I put it, Jeff?
Okay, I'm trying to find it. Oh,
It's gonna be towards the bottom.
I'm sorry. It's gonna be where?
Towards
the list in reverse order?
Nope. Nope. It's towards the bottom.
Cole. He put it at number 47
Out of
a current 56. He put it at 47.
Explain.
What's above?
It's
and below?
above moment by moment. Below, it's a below moment by moment. Above Nicolas Cage and Face Off.
That was a good joke. That was a good bit. That was a good bit.
So the reason being is because Travolta's hair is short, but it's not like the buzzed cut short we saw in Basic or Lucky Numbers. It's like the short and thinning. because it's like thinning hair in the front and it's short. He does have a mustache. He does have a handlebar mustache, but I think it only serves to make him look evil, and it doesn't look sexy of any kind at all. Which I know I've said on this podcast that I don't judge it based purely on looks. I judge it based on like storytelling narrative. For the audience at home, while Cole is on Zoom, we have our video feed open, and should we play the? Should we?
No, I mean,
okay.
No, I haven't.
You said you finish your thought.
Finish saying what you're saying, Stuart.
So
You're on the hot seat.
I'm on the hot seat. I'm just seeing Cole's reaction on Zoom. It makes me frightened.
Finish your thought.
So I think it does a good job of like showing who he is as a character. I agree with that. But in terms of the work that went into it, I don't necessarily think it beats any of the ones above it. Like moment by moment, it's below moment by moment. And say what you will, but at least it's longer Travolta hair. Like it's kind of okay. And it fits his like young aesthetic look. Yeah. And then what's above moment by moment, just to see where we're at.
Above moment by moment is... Right above moment by moment is his look in the finale of Swordfish, which is because he changes his hair halfway through the movie.
Is there a single
choice
Travolta fit that conveys character more than his look in this movie?
Oh, 100%.
Truly.
Oh, 100%.
Name one.
Swordfish.
Ridiculous. No one can tell me what he looks like in Swordfish. I've seen Swordfish.
Long hair.
What does that say about this character? Everything you need to know
that he's maniacal
about
and
John
crazy.
Travolta's character in this movie
that he's batshit
is in that slowed down shot that Jeff was talking to you about, where you see the hairstyle.
It's
all in the hair.
Because he's got the...
I have to object.
Listen,
I'm going to object too. I'm going to object because... No,
listen.
Because here's the thing. This is the first time I think Travolta's let his hair look bad in a movie.
Which is the point.
Because every time we've talked about... Like, he's had bad hair in a movie, but it's not like he's intentionally let it look bad. Like, he thought The Experts was a good idea at the time.
Yeah, and it wasn't a good idea.
But this is intentionally bad looking. It's receded. He's got like a prison hat right here, like below the handlebar.
Yeah, I hear you guys all out, and I'm not saying that all doesn't work for me, but I still hold, like, you know, if I have to balance the equation out in terms of narrative importance versus looks, you know, it's really far down on the looks chain, and it's somewhat in the happy medium of the narrative chain, and therefore I think that's where it deserves placement.
It's not in the happy medium of the narrative chain.
I
it's
think
in the
so.
Apex of the narrative
I
chain.
think there's a lot better movies that showcase what his character is supposed to be narratively. I'll give you Phenomenon with his, like, you know, 5 o'clock shadow and his wrinkled hair towards the end of the movie, and then the haircut scene.
Where's Phenomenon?
Let me find out where Phenomenon is.
Where's Phenomenon?
Phenomenon's number 24.
Phenomenon's number 24. And
I think you've just made the argument it has to be at least number 25. It probably should be in the top 5.
All right,
let me throw that out there.
Let me see the list.
Yeah, this is definitely a look.
Let me see the list.
John Travolta walks into this movie, and what is your immediate reaction to John Travolta in this movie?
He looks like a New York scumbag.
Yeah.
He looks like an idiot.
Yeah.
He looks like an idiot. He doesn't look tough. He looks weird. What's the reveal of John Travolta's character?
That he's a New York banker trying to make himself look like a
everything
thug.
You need to know.
Sorry,
about
I don't
John
get any of that when I see
movie.
John Travolta in the first thing.
Like, he looks like a bad impression of a thug.
Yeah, every single thing you need to know about what this guy's going to do for the rest of the movie is conveyed in that first shot through the hair. That's the thing. The tattoo is an accoutrement. You could lose the tat and you still got it. It's all in the hair.
But Austin Powers in Goldmember, when he has the blonde wig and the, you know, and
this is not a counter argument.
Stuff on his face.
This is not a counter argument.
I mean, I've said this before, though. It's not purely based on the narrative importance of it. It's based on both narrative and looks. And so
and it's one of his most iconic looks.
I don't agree. I think in the movie we're going to talk about in 2 weeks, From Paris with Love, people remember him more for being bald than anything else. So if we're talking about like what's he's really known for, I'm sorry, but I have like 15 movies that are all in the middle of this list of the same fucking hair he wore in the 90s and then he's bald. And those are the two hairstyles.
Remind me.
So it basically goes from...
What's number one?
Number one is Staying Alive.
Yeah. Hey, Jeff, can you do me a favor?
Yes.
Can you copy that list, open it in another document, put Pelham at number one, and then just keep your own list?
No.
Yes, I can do that right now. I'm making sheet number 2.
It's not going to be valid because I came up with this hair ranking from the very beginning.
So here's what's happening. There's a sheet that says Stuart's list, and then there's a second one called correct list.
No.
Yeah.
Shut the fuck up.
Well, let's take a
you
vote.
You can't
Who says Stuart's list is
hijack
canon?
my list. I made this list. It's mine.
Let's take a vote.
And
Who
I
says
own
Stuart's
it.
list is canon? Raise your hand if Stuart's list is canon.
Yeah, all of us. Listen.
Raise your hand if the correct list is canon.
No, shut the fuck up. I can't be outvoted on this podcast that I made. I control the buttons, Jeff. I control the dials. I can make anything happen. And look, I understand the thought that this guy, you have this vision of him in your head the first thing you see him as. I simply don't feel that strongly about how I feel about him when I first see him on screen. Because I see him on screen, the first thing I think of is like, oh, he could be like next Khan or something like that. Or he could be like, I don't know, any other butch guy. Like I don't see all of those layers that you're pointing out. I think that's a little bit of a reach, personally, if I may add. And then I have to go to, like, you know, where he progresses in the story and how his hair correlates with that. And yeah, sure, it like helps a little bit that, oh, it turns out he's a bad guy holding hostages, and it helps that he has like short, thinning hair with a handlebar mustache. Like, I get that, but it doesn't really do anything else for me. And I don't think looks-wise it doesn't do anything for me. Like, it doesn't make him any more menacing. It doesn't make him any less menacing. It's just
it makes
there.
him so much less menacing.
No, I don't think it does. I think
he looks so gooby.
I
mean, he looks so goofy.
I was watching this movie. This movie.
I'm sorry.
And Becca rounded the corner right as he like walks out, and she just started laughing immediately. And I think that's the perfect like reaction to have when you see this guy.
It's what you're supposed to feel.
Yeah.
I think you're giving this way too much credit than what it actually deserves. I do not think that this was put into...
We've talked about every good John Travolta performance in some capacity kind of plays to his like natural aloofness. Like, he has a general like remove of himself. Like, he's generally just seems like a kind of goofy, aloof guy. And the best Travolta performances are usually ones that play with that. There are a few that don't.
Listen,
that turned out
we
good.
are already an hour into this podcast.
And we're having a good conversation.
Take that a step further, Jeff, and not to say anything that is going to get me in trouble, because there's been a thing about John Travolta that I'm pretty sure you two have consciously never mentioned before. Mm-hmm. But all the really good John Travolta performances are explorations of like performed heterosexual swag.
Mm-hmm.
And this guy is that more than like anything.
Yes.
That this is someone who has like a cartoon image in his head of what the bad guy in a Denzel Washington movie looks like.
Mm-hmm. And he tries to fill
chosen to look like that, but he looks lame because he's a 50-something John Travolta. How old is Travolta in this movie?
In this, Travolta would be...
Well, how old is he now, I guess?
So Travolta nowadays is 67. He would have been roughly like 55-ish.
57.
When they're filming this?
This is all great, well said and done, but I'm still putting John Travolta where I put him in the list.
That's okay, because you're
allowed to be wrong.
So, Cole, what is this exhibit that you brought to the table?
Oh, it's. I mean, can you cut this next bit out? It doesn't matter. It's invalidated at this point. I had a piece of audio in which you said that importance to the narrative is just as important as how much it looked. And so I was keeping that in my back pocket in case you tried to make the argument you didn't make.
You tried to say it was just based on the look.
Yeah. In that same piece of audio, you also acknowledged that facial hair counts. So I had both potential counter arguments that I thought were completely invalid.
Well, I'm glad I did not walk into that one.
That would have been amazing.
You came close.
I came close.
You came real close.
But I did not walk into it. I acknowledge that, yes, and I will always acknowledge that, yes, narrative does matter to the hair ranking. It definitely does. But I value the two somewhat equally.
Yeah.
And I think there are some movies where, like, does he need that amazing hair in Staying Alive? Not really. I mean, if anything, you could say him being a dancer with long hair actually hinders himself because it's going to get in his face. But, like, I still think that, like, the hair, the look, the style, he just looks the best he can ever look in Staying Alive. We'll never get that back again because of, you know, his age. But I will always hold that, like, that hair is just so goddamn, like, you can't resist looking at him.
To go into that, you know, if we're playing with the idea of every Travolta performance is in some way like a facet of masculinity, he's intentionally playing Stallone in Staying Alive.
Yeah.
And
yeah, I agree. I've said it before. It's the Rambo hair.
Yeah, it's the Rambo hair, and he's just playing Stallone in that movie. To the extent that there's that one part,
the Rambo hair.
There's that part where he bumps into Stallone on the street after being denied for like 3 jobs, and Stallone's like, "Yeah, it's a tough job, isn't it?" And then they keep going.
Yeah. So this is all.
Do we want to do the out of hair ranking music?
Yeah, let's. We don't have it out of hair ranking music.
Do we not?
I've said this before. There's only the intro, and then we just kind of segue.
There was some point where we had an out of hair ranking music.
I'm too lazy.
There's like some episode where
Listen,
when
I have to put all these sound effects in
right.
post, I am the laziest when it comes to that, and so I only do an intro. So.
Okay.
Now back to the movie where we're in the fucking 1 minute mark, and we're an hour.
Has just walked past the screen.
To 99 Problems.
Yes.
Which
that's
which
the
I
song.
think is a great piece of music because it's Jay-Z's retirement song.
Mm-hmm.
It's Jay-Z's transition point into mogul, right? That like the flexing Jay-Z is doing on that song of like running drugs, getting hassled by cops is completely divorced from the actual life of the man rapping that song, which is the exact same relationship John Travolta has to being a gun-toting badass.
Yeah.
He's playing dress up.
Mm-hmm. He is.
Yeah.
It's also an incredible opening montage.
Yes. So
of the time-lapse hyper sped up photography of people making their way through the New York City streets,
like
slamming to a halt when the movie star enters the picture.
Yes.
Really.
Like right away and I think Cole in your letterbox review of this film you pointed out like right away this movie just is like there's nothing that looks like this anymore.
Remember when people had the confidence to just crush blacks in a movie?
Just let a thing like as hyper. This is a specific type of hyper stylization that very few directors are working with anymore, and very few were working with at the time. It was your Tony Scotts, your Michael Bays, guys who are
your Michael Manns,
who would work in this specific style, this specific color palette, the specific like movement, and most importantly, this specific style of editing. Because this thing is like, but it all feels in place. For the listener at home, I was smacking my hand together for like cuts. But everything has.
Jeff, take your hand
in
out of your
place.
pants right now, please.
Okay. Oh God. And back up against the wall.
Until we get a video content, ain't no way to prove.
Okay.
Anyway, so yeah, that's when we get to Denzel in the control room.
So I had not seen this movie before. I did not really read much into this movie prior to watching it, which
Clearly the context corner was fucking lazy.
Which is why it's in the wrong spot, and we started the troll exploitation era too early. But right away, I was just like, all right, Denzel. I knew Denzel, I knew Travolta, and then it just starts hitting me with John Turturro, Luis Guzman, James
and
Gandolfini.
Guzman shows up before his name.
Yes,
appears like well before his name. You're like, in fact, it's before Denzel shows up, I think.
Yeah, because he's just he was walking down to the train platform.
Yeah,
it's Travolta, Guzman, and the 2 henchmen.
Yeah,
One of whom is apparently just a teamster who worked on the movie.
Love it.
Who Tony Scott thought looked threatening.
And I will say, as somebody, Jeff and I, we work on a TV show. We've worked with plenty of teamsters.
I've seen teamsters who could be thugs in movies.
Yeah.
Like if you want to stock like a good like tough guy personnel, just go to like base camp and just like
Sorry, are you implying that there's ever been anything shady about the International
Teamsters
Federation of
Union.
Teamsters?
specifically on film
I have
sets.
nothing but love for the Teamsters union's role.
Yes, they do. And I wish we were in one.
And maybe organized crime doesn't really hurt anybody. Okay.
So anyway,
Okay.
we get Denzel in the control room,
Yes, we get to Denzel after we were introduced to Travolta's crew.
and we see the sort of monotony procedural work that he does every day.
Yes.
Talking to each train, being like, "Hey,
He's just-
like, what's the problem
He's
here?"
the conductor.
He's the conductor.
But
guy.
he's literally a conductor, right?
Yeah.
He's like I noticed that like very early on someone calls him a maestro.
Yes.
Yeah.
He's literally like conducting it like he's conducting a symphony.
And he stands in front of this like somewhat circular
Like
screen,
semicircle
a giant,
desk,
Yeah,
yeah.
semicircle desk, and he's basically just like, you go there, you go there. It's like you're saying, it's full on conducting. He's
Yeah.
controlling the grid of the city.
And if Stuart, have you seen the 74?
The original film.
No.
Okay. I don't really want to talk about the original film. I love it, but I feel like people talk about this in relation to it too much. But I did want to say, people do not like this movie, the Tony Scott Taking a Pelham 1, 2, 3, and the main reason people tend to cite about not making this movie is that they don't think it hits the same beats as the original.
Yeah.
Because in the original, Mathau is like the schlubbiest schlub who ever lived. Like he's a complete loser. He looks like shit. He's just like some schmuck who happens to get caught up in this.
Yeah.
And from like the immediate moment we're meeting Denzel, he's a dude working a desk job, but he's like radiating charisma.
Yeah, and he's
And
on
not only
top of
charisma, but professionalism. Like I said, he's conducting these trains
Yeah.
like they're a symphony. He's the machine. He's the guy that makes the machine work.
I mean, for me, like the energy that I read right away was he's a dad. This is an everyday working Joe who has a family to go home to at the end of the day.
Everyday working Joes don't look like Denzel Washington.
Yeah, they do. Yeah, they do. Yeah, they do. Because you notice, like, Denzel actually kind of had, like, a little bit of a belly on him. You notice he wasn't, like, a fit action superstar. Like, that he's actually...
I will get to this. I think it's by design that he's sitting for so much of the movie that the scenes where he gets up and you see the belly are where he's at his weakest. Until you get to the last third. There's a reason he's kept sitting for so much of it, is to emphasize his face in this frame
Yeah.
and how radiant his face is and how much of he's just a star.
Oh, yeah, he's
Like-
he's in the zone of his work. And, like, and I definitely agree to that for sure, that he has, like, a work mode that he goes into.
The Denzel thing in this movie for me is that, like you're saying, the original film, Walter Matthau is basically just a loser. And Denzel's a loser in this in a different way, his character is. But this movie is about... It fits into that Tony Scott, Michael Mann thing about guys who are good at their jobs and how they contrast with guys who are not good at their jobs. And the guys who take their jobs for granted and guys who try and do jobs that they're not prepared for. And that, you know, keeps saying throughout the movie, he's a guy who started at the bottom. He started as a
motorman.
Motorman, that's the word. They keep saying he's a motorman to start, and he worked his way up the chain to become the
Like the chief
the chief
dispatcher.
Yeah, he's not even a working stiff anymore. He's an executive.
Yes.
Like this is another thing where you're supposed to you clock the truth of the character kind of immediately.
There's even a quick dialogue bit at the beginning where he says, "Yeah, I'm not so far away from being inside the room," and it cuts to an angle of like the chief executive dispatcher or whatever. So yeah, like that makes its point very clearly in the movie.
That he's a guy who has recently been humbled, but he's still bringing that professionalism from above down below.
Yeah, and he's got all eyes on him. Not in a good way either.
Yeah.
Like, he put in his time, he put in his hours, and he's proven himself, but he's made one slip up, and he's got the eyes on him.
Yeah.
Like, people are looking at him very closely. Which I got that parallel with Travolta Ryder was trying to make with Walter. So, cool. The next thing I can remember is they get on the train, the bad guys.
The hijacking happens very early in the movie.
Yeah.
Because it's basically just like, you're introduced to Denzel, and then we cut back to the train. There's a little bit of business.
They're getting on. They're
with the four guys moving through, and then
Travolta holds up like one of the conductors.
Yeah. He says the great line where he's like, "You're a conductor, well, you're going to conduct these people off the train."
Oh, that's later.
That's that later?
That's the woman.
Later.
Yeah,
Okay.
when he shoots somebody already, and it's like, "What's your name?" And it's like, I don't know what her name is, but it's like, all right, well, Brenda, you're the conductor. So you're going to conduct, and that's the whole thing. But there's a male conductor at the front of the train that he holds a gun to.
Yeah.
And he holds it in a way where it's like his arms inside like the window so people can't like clearly see he's holding a gun. And he's holding him hostage like, you're going to unlock the door so we can get into like
the control room the pilots. Or
yeah, like we were calling it like a train, like a cockpit, but it's
the cockpit.
It's not, but it kind of is.
Don't look at me.
Caboose.
It's the driver's seat. It's the control room, right?
Yeah.
It's where the motorman.
Yeah.
is.
So they get in and they take control of the train. Guy who get
All right, I want to segue really quick.
not Tudoro.
Louis Guzman.
Yeah.
Segue.
So I want to segue really quick. So Cole, you live in New York.
I do.
How accurate is this film to the actual MTA? Is it the MTA there?
Yes, it's the MTA.
Okay, it's the MTA. How authentic is this?
I mean, in what direction are you asking?
Like, does this play with the rules of the real MTA, or is it kind of just like doing its own thing in terms of like the vibe and just like the train lines and whatnot?
The train lines are mostly accurate to my knowledge.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes they'll do some things where they're switching like off screen. They're like not explicitly saying something, but like the lineage makes sense. Like they completely switch lines. Like to jump ahead quickly, the climax of this movie takes them onto the elevated tracks. That the train that is hijacked does not go onto the elevated tracks, does not go into Brooklyn at all, but it could conceivably at a station switch lines basically.
Yeah. Okay.
Like all that stuff makes sense. All the stops make sense. I don't think they're cheating there. They shoot most of this actually in Brooklyn, I believe. Most of the exteriors. So there's a stop in Brooklyn called Hoyt Schermerhorn, which is kind of near where I live, that has a bunch of decommissioned tunnels.
Yeah.
It's kind of roughly where the Transit Museum is, because the Transit Museum is in an abandoned subway station. Because it has a lot of tunnels, anytime really you see something shot in New York where they're like in the tunnels, they're going to shoot it in Brooklyn because you can do that without having to kill the train lines. In terms of what stops they're at, what tracks they're on, it's pretty accurate. This is like the least attended train car I've ever been on in my life.
There's like 7 guys.
Especially for
rush hour.
The middle of the afternoon.
It's 1:23. So like
Midtown?
Yeah.
No, absolutely not.
There's like 8 guys.
You kind of just got to take that and accept that because it's in the title. Like by virtue of this movie being called The Taking of Pelham 1, 2, 3, which it has to be, the train has to run on a specific track.
Yes, it will.
Which means it has to run to time. They are like they're basically one stop north of Times Square
when they get taken.
Okay. When they park the trains, they're basically one stop north of Times Square.
Okay.
So think about what you think the traffic would be like on a train headed into Times Square at like 2 p.m, even if it is coming from the Bronx.
Yeah.
No. and especially the real problem is the subway platforms. When they're hanging on the platforms and there's like no traffic, that's ridiculous.
Okay.
But that's a movie thing, you know? Like I've lived in Chicago. You two have lived in Chicago. When has a CTA platform looked like a CTA platform in terms of the amount of bodies that are present?
Never. Okay. So I just wanted that clarification because I've there's obviously been a lot of movies set in New York that fake the train lines and fake the train platform, and I was just genuinely curious about.
No, it's actually pretty accurate. Like I said, they just switch. They basically just switch what line they're going to be on, but that switch geographically is possible.
Sense.
It's just not stated.
I will say, just as a form of like pretext and something I can bring to the table, is I was on a shoot last summer of 2021, and we had some scenes that took place on the CTA, both on the train and on the platform, and both elements were had their difficult moments. For instance, like we had a few separate days where it was like train work, and then we had some days where it was like on the platform. For the train work, the audience who doesn't live in Chicago, and for Cole, like you may not know these, but like Jeff and I, who know like the stops pretty well, we shot on the Brown Loop that started at Harold Washington Library. And it took a line that, the loop. Like the loop, literally, you could switch the lines in a way where a train could go in a circle, and it just doesn't stop. Now, that's not how the loop really works. I mean, you have the red line that comes in, and the red line goes straight through the loop. The brown line, which comes in, it does do a loop, but then the brown line comes back up north, and so vice versa and such. There isn't like a dedicated loop train, to my understanding. Like they all go in separate directions. Yeah. But the way we shot
the brown and the orange run the same pattern.
Yeah, the brown and orange like come to the loop, take a loop, and then go back out. And so what we did is we basically hijacked a brown line train, but instead of the switcher.
Wait. Are you saying you guys were taking a train?
The Harold Washington of 7:12 a.m.
The taking of Harold Washington 117.
It's kind of what we did, but we had like an old decommissioned train, and we simply just like went on a track that allowed us to go into a circle.
I worked on it.
It was 4 cars. I know this is so nerdy, and like the audience probably doesn't care about this at all, but like the first AD talked to all the PAs the day before about like how we were going to shoot it. So like we had 4 cars. The second front car was the hero car. Then the front car was going to be grip and electric. The second back car was like Video Village and sound and all that stuff. And then the backpack car was DIT and like all that other stuff. And every time they made a stop, like the grips would come out of the front car and bring in some lights in the other car. And you couldn't stop for very long either because the platform was still a working platform. So we had, I'm going to give this man a shout out by name, Bill Riley. If you've ever worked for people in Chicago, if you've ever worked on a film TV show where you have to use a CTA, Bill Riley is almost always the CTA representative.
The railroad, everything about the railroad wants
Railroad! Bill Riley, I hope you listen to our podcast. Okay. He probably doesn't, but anyway.
I love the railroad. I'm now going to be the guy who says we are 5 minutes into this. They have not taken the train yet.
So I will say one of the nice things about New York is that there's more compared to Chicago. I mean, there's more underground stations, which means you can shoot at night stuff that's meant to be set in the day. So I had read this earlier. I just did some skimming. Like I said, they shot a lot of the tunnel stuff in Brooklyn in those unused tunnels. They shot the hijacking in the middle of the night when on a train line that wasn't running in Grand Central.
Yeah.
Because some of the trains stop overnight, obviously. And then a lot of this movie was actually shot in the studio. Most of the train car interiors are just a recreation done in a studio.
Oh yeah, definitely.
But like I said, you have these empty spaces and empty tunnels that you can shoot in, which is why I feel like you see more New York set subway shooting in New York movies than you do in Chicago movies.
Well, I wanted to say exactly just that, because I'm sure there are some decommissioned underground subway lines. I don't know that many though.
So
I don't think so either. Like surely there are some like underground tunnels, but in terms of underground subway lines that aren't active in Chicago,
there's some that don't run at night, but it's very few and far between. It's like
and even then, like where are you going to shoot at night to try to pass for day?
Yeah,
in a Chicago subway,
and
if it's not running.
Yeah,
and another thing because those stations are so tiny too.
Yeah, that's another thing that you compare New York and Chicago subway stations is that New York's feel big underground. Like there'll be
they're much larger.
Yeah, there are parts where they're like 5 tracks next to each other.
Yeah,
in Chicago, like it's 3 at most.
Yeah.
Because if you think about I'm thinking about Chicago shot movies, and like most Chicago set movies that are shot in Chicago will have like a snippet on the trains.
Yes,
but it's really a snippet,
and it's usually above the ground.
And it's usually above the ground. And a lot of times it'll even be like a lot of it will be exteriors or on the platforms, I feel like.
Yeah.
Like I always marvel at, this is such a weird shot, but I always think about, there's a shot in High Fidelity where it's a tracking shot of him like walking up the Wicker Park Blue Line station. You know what I'm talking about?
Yes, we are currently 3 blocks from it.
Yeah, it's literally just a shot of Cusack like walking up onto the platform, talking to the camera, getting on and getting a seat on the train. And I think about that and I'm like, you had to like shut down the Blue Line
for that
to do that because there's no way to reroute those trains. There's no bonus money. And New York has empty lines you can use.
And that was the other thing too about our show. So I said like we did a train shot, we did a platform shot, and the platform shot we did in the Blue Line, the Milwaukee stop at Logan Square, and we had to lock up that platform, and that's a long platform. It's a
long platform.
It's like the Milwaukee Blue Line stop. Like if you walk from one end to the other end, you're basically walking like 2 city blocks. And so what we had to do is we had security blocking the exits and had to tell people to reroute, go down Milwaukee and go the other Blue Line entrance. Then we had to have other lock PAs at the midpoint of the platform underground to lock up like the crowds and that stuff. But we also had background in it too. It's a whole thing if you want to shoot like an underground, above ground platform for any public transportation. Yeah. It's such a fucking hassle. And yeah.
Hey, Stuart.
Yeah.
How long are we into this episode? How long have we been recording?
Hour and a half.
and how far are we into the movie?
They have not taken the train yet.
They have not taken the train yet. Cole, do you have an out? Do you have an out time?
We spend talking about filming locations in Chicago,
I'm sure we could. A lot. I'm sure. What's your out time? Do you have an out time? It's currently 5 p.m. Central. I think it's
I don't.
Okay.
I mean, if I'm being honest. 2 hours from now, if we're still going 2 hours from now,
we can clear it up in 2 hours. We've been able to sprint through a plot before.
That is the least interesting thing. They kidnap the train. Who gives a shit?
They take the train and they get out the train.
Yeah, so let's just get to that point.
Okay, let me blow through this. So John Travolta, Luis Guzman, two henchmen, they get on the train, they take the train hostage, they decouple a single car.
Yeah.
Yes.
And let everyone off the train that's not in the front car, decouple the front car with their hostages, and then basically just park themselves in a stretch of the tunnel.
Yeah. Yes. And there's a quick bit where like Travolta does kill a Metro Transit cop.
It's not Travolta, it's the one guy
right.
Like
it's one of the random
guys.
Psycho.
And that's an interesting bit that it should be established because it shows right away they're trigger happy to kill people,
but not just that they're trigger happy, but that they're disorganized. Because like it's like the Waingro thing in Heat, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's like you have the one guy on the team who's maybe a little too trigger happy, but you watch something like Heat when Waingro opens fire, everyone else is like, "What the fuck is this guy doing?" But when this guy just starts randomly gunning people down, and to be fair, it is a cop he guns down. It's not just a civilian. You kind of get the sense that like they haven't had the conversation about this because these guys aren't hardened criminals. They're guys playing at being hardened criminals, and they've grabbed these two gunmen, but they don't really have like a plan of attack.
Like Travolta kills a lot of people in this movie.
Well, he kills them when he says he's going to.
And he doesn't do it like grace. Travolta is essentially playing the bad version of his character from Mad City in this. Because in Mad City, he's a guy who takes hostages in over his head and then just kind of freaks out. He accidentally shoots a guy at one point.
But he actually counts down and pulls the trigger for one.
That's what I'm saying.
This is my point. When they kill the cop at the very beginning, they're not ready for that. Yeah. They're caught off guard because they thought they would have time before the police were alerted to them. But they didn't consider the possibility of there being a cop on the train. And that's the first sign you get that these guys kind of suck at what they're doing.
I don't see Travolta so much as like an out of his depth criminal. I see so much as he's so radicalized that's how I see Travolta. Is he's someone who has been radicalized in his belief that, you know, the system hates him now and he has no way to get out of it anymore, like from being like the Wall Street guy. That was something that kind of bumped me a little bit about the movie is like they give you like small snippets and pieces of Ryder's backstory, but none of it really ever like clicks along the way. You just eventually get to the point where he grabs the money and then he tells Denzel to shoot him, and it kind of gives you a little bit of insight, but like there wasn't ever any given point of like, okay, this guy started in Wall Street, he lost all his money or whatever in this deal, or he got arrested for this thing or whatever, and this all happened, and now he's this guy. I mean, they do little pieces, and there is like one connecting bit with the mayor, but I felt like overall, like I didn't have like a full cohesive picture of who this guy was until by the time the movie ended.
I don't know about that.
I understand.
I don't know about that.
But so
I think my counter to that would be I don't think he's a very complicated person.
Mm-hmm.
I think he's just like a slimy Wall Street loser. Those people aren't complicated. They just think they're in charge. Travolta is playing a guy who thinks he's in charge. And to some degree he is, and to some other degree he really isn't. And I think this movie is gradually about the growing understanding that he's never really a threat to anyone. He might be a threat to the people on the train, but this movie is kind of about how that doesn't really matter.
Because there's no way he's ever going to get away with it.
Because there's no way he's ever going to get away from it.
There's never a chance. The system of New York is built against him, and the
organism of New York is going to squash these guys. And nothing Denzel Washington or John Travolta do matters ultimately in the course.
Because I think it's telling that what defeats Travolta at the end of the movie isn't Denzel. It's not the police. It's traffic on the bridge.
It's traffic on the bridge, and it's Travolta's own desire to be in charge.
Mm-hmm.
It's the 1-2 punch of both those things.
Because if there's not traffic, we'll talk about it when we get to the end, but if there's not traffic at the end of the movie, he gets away.
Mm-hmm.
But there was never a possibility that there wasn't going to be traffic because in addition to the subways being crowded, the bridges are going to be crowded.
Yeah. Because like, let's just, if we're in the ending, but I think I might forget this when we actually get to the ending. All the hostage takers die in this,
yes.
Which is the big change this movie makes from the original, where the original, they either die or they get rounded up because, the system is smarter than they are.
Yeah.
And in this one, New York squashes them like flies, but they all die in like embarrassing ways. Travolta gets held up by traffic and functionally commits suicide by cop. Guzman gets shot by an accident, and the two goons kind of just get got by like divine providence.
Yeah.
They just happen to walk out the subway, and then like for some reason, it's technically kind of a plot hole. I think they like shout like a line to justify it. It doesn't feel that justified on a narrative level, but it feels justified on a cosmological level that these two guys who aren't that important walk out of the subway, and every cop in the city is suddenly on them.
Yeah, it surrounds
because they're losers.
They don't matter.
It doesn't matter. They were never going to matter. This movie is about, to what degree do people matter more than the state? And the answer is, fuck you. The state matters more than anything else. You're either on board or you aren't.
Yeah, you either play the game or you don't.
Yeah, which is what the whole Gandolfini stretch of it all is.
And
playing just the fucking, really cashing a paycheck. Good for John Gandolfini. Really kind of sleepwalking his way through this movie. James Gandolfini, sorry.
He's kind of just showing up doing like a kind of Rudy and then getting out.
He's doing a kind of Rudy, but the character's more based on Bloomberg. It's a very weird performance. He doesn't seem like he's that happy to be in the movie. He's fine.
He's one of those actors who just brings a natural presence that you can coast by on.
Yeah.
Like, he's not doing his Lonely Hearts...
Detective Stromboli.
Yeah, so, Cole, we recently did an episode on the film Lonely Hearts, which is a Travolta... Have you seen it?
It's in my podcatcher. I have not seen it. I have no idea what this movie's about.
It's a Gandolfini-Travolta two-hander where they're trying to catch the Lonely Hearts killers. And Travolta barely speaks in the movie. He's, like, in mourning the whole time, which leaves Gandolfini to do most of the talking. And almost every line, and he's playing like a New York Italian cop, and almost every line of his is something like, "Yeah, I was down at the fucking like pastrami deli," and he's the entire time he's just rambling on about that shit, to the extent that we just called him Detective Stromboli in the episode because there's nothing more to it. But he's not even.
But anyway,
Yeah.
The plot.
The thrust of this movie, the meat of this movie. Travolta and his guys have taken these people hostage. Denzel is just the MTA dispatcher who happens to be on the horn.
Yes.
And the meat of this movie is an extended series of conversations that these two men are having over the phone. It's really the radio. But basically, as I said to you, Jeff, this is a movie about two movie stars having a long phone call.
Yes.
And
that anytime
think that rules.
And anytime a non-movie star tries to jump in, they are quickly cut off.
They're quickly cut off. And I think what it is that both these two men recognize something in each other.
Mm-hmm.
And what they recognize is the idea that they're the central characters in this narrative.
Yes. And that
everyone else is not. And this is why I think this movie's a two-hander. Because I think this movie is about the relationships movie stars have on screen to each other as compared to the relationships movie stars have to character actors, even if they don't meet face to face until the very end of the movie, because these two immediately connect.
Yes.
And they see that they're the same person, both in that metatextual sense and in this narrative sense, that they're both
guys who feel like they were conned by the system.
Guys who say they're conned by the system. Oh, yeah,
but they totally did the crime.
But guys who are actually just like bottom feeders looking out for themselves.
Yes.
And Denzel says he's not that guy.
He took a bribe.
That's the question, right?
He
the
took
movie
a bribe.
Doesn't really take a side.
He took a bribe, but he used it for his kids, which I think
he says he used it for his kids.
Right.
But he still
says
took a bribe.
Lot of things.
It depends on what your moral seesaw.
The movie sets me up to believe him, though.
But he says he gave it to his kids after like 5 straight minutes of him insisting it never happened in the first place.
Yeah, because it would he's surrounded by all his bosses and didn't want to incriminate himself.
But why is he telling the truth now? Like, the movie doesn't. That's the thing. That's what I'm saying. We are inclined to believe Denzel Washington because he is Denzel Washington. Because the movie shoots him like a good guy. Because he is scored like a good guy. But if you actually think about it,
is he a good guy in this movie?
Yeah. He is.
According to what besides the very Denzel Washington-ness of him?
I don't think it's all the Denzel Washington-ness of him. I think it's about how the narrative structures the story around the character.
But he took a bribe.
And I understand that. And characters can have flaws, but it doesn't mean they're the bad guy.
He tries to weasel out of it at every opportunity.
This is the opposite of the Save the Cat moment for Denzel Washington, where it's like we think he's a good guy all along, and we're wondering, like, okay, where does he have his flaws? Like, why are we supposed to trust this guy? And then we find out that, oh, no, he's not a perfect guy. He did do something wrong, but he did it for whatever reasons, but he ended up, like, whether he gave it to his kids, whether you think that's a good thing, but maybe whether he's atoned for his sins. But I think it just adds a spice of flavor to his, like, character depth. I think it just adds depth to him, and I don't think it necessarily targets him as one or the other. I think it's just nuance. And I think the same thing could be said for Travolta. Like, he's not just the bad guy, but he's also not just the good guy. I mean, he's a murderer. He's a Wall Street guy. He's taking people hostage. He's putting people's lives at risk, but because he was conned by the system. Like,
but he wasn't conned by the system.
Well, he says he was conned by the system.
He says he was, but he's...
So does Denzel. He says he was
that's
conned.
What I'm saying.
Clearly, Travolta is clearly a psychotic...
But that's what I'm saying.
Like,
it's like
monster.
you're all proving my point is that it's not just like one flip side or the other. It's all nuance. And I think you can sort of take in your own evidence and information as whatever you want. And if you have like an interpretation of it, I think that it should be validated regardless. And so for me, having Denzel like show up at his job, he's a family man, he has kids, he's really good, he has high aims, he started from the bottom, he's hardworking.
Now we're here.
He's taken a bribe, and he's done some shady shit. I think it's all just in efforts to what his goals are, and his goals aren't malintentioned.
Yeah.
And so it doesn't necessarily turn me away from like rooting for him at all. Whereas John Travolta doesn't do anything to make me not want to see him killed or put behind bars. Like, there isn't a single saving grace moment for him, in my opinion, in the movie.
Well, no, I mean, I think Travolta is clearly like a monster in this movie.
Yeah.
You know, he's a murderer, and worse, he's a a stockbroker. But he
Good one.
thank you, Jeff.
That was good.
Thank you,
That
Jeff.
was very good.
That was good.
But he keeps saying like this movie is predicated so much on this like elemental connection that Travolta feels from Denzel the second he starts talking to him, and it's that he recognizes something of himself in Denzel. Like I don't, if you read that as just bluster, I think there's nothing to this movie.
Mm-hmm.
But if you read that as true, then I think the movie becomes the question of like, why do we justify, why do we want to like brush aside like bad behavior in movie stars? Why are we so willing to like go on Denzel Washington's side when for most of this movie, he's just taken a phone call?
Mm-hmm.
Why are we cheering at the end when he all of a sudden is going vigilante and hunting down John Travolta in action that undeniably leads to a man's death?
And that's where
we're doing that because it's Denzel Washington.
But I almost disagree with that, just because that did bump me in the movie as well. That Denzel, who for the entire portion of this movie is just a dude who gets caught up in a phone call. Mm-hmm. And when he gets told to go home, sure, he says like, oh, I do want to see this through, which you could say, yeah, that's him trying to insert himself into the hero spotlight. Yeah. Or you could just say he's someone who is genuinely concerned about it, like a good buddy of his, the motorman got shot. There's other people that are at risk for this, and he wants to see it through.
Stuart,
you could make...
You have to go deeper.
No, I am, but hear me out. But like then... Eventually, he does agree, and he does go home, or at least he's on his way home, and it's John Travolta that reels him back in. And so, for all this movie, nothing really made me think otherwise of, oh, like, he doesn't really want to be here. I mean, he's here, and he understands he's here, and he has, like, a moral duty to, like, see it through to the end. But then, after he delivers the money, after he escapes from them, then he does decide to, all of a sudden, and I will say all of a sudden, because it is suddenly, to be like, okay, actually, I'm going to go after these guys. I am going to take my gun that the cops gave to me just for my own personal protection, but I'm going to use it to hunt these guys down. And that bumped me. I was like, okay, now this is not who we've been building up this character to be. And now, all of a sudden, he wants to, like, what? Murder Travolta? Kill a guy? Or at least stop him?
He wants to be a hero.
Right. He wants to kill him. He wants to be a hero.
Does he want to kill him, or does he want to stop him? Those are very different things.
He wants to be a hero.
No. In a summer action movie, are those two things different things?
Yes.
If you're watching a Denzel Washington movie and Denzel Washington has a gun and he's hunting down the bad guy, is there a distinction within our expectations as spectators?
Because he didn't have to pull the trigger. And I'll tell you, he didn't have to pull the trigger.
But as an audience member,
I'm not saying literally within the narrative. I am saying within the generic function of a movie like this. Once Denzel Washington touches the gun, we want Denzel Washington
to kill the bad
shoot
guy.
The guy. And my question is, I think this movie is because it is so jarring that Denzel gets up and becomes an actioner at the end. I think this movie is asking us, why are we willing to extend this much grace to a movie star who we have coded as good and not to a Travolta? I'm not saying we should be extending the grace to Travolta, but I think the movie is basically saying these guys are the same, but I'm going to frame one of them differently so that you then, the audience, are willing to excuse away all the red flags that I'm shoving in your face about this.
Because if you take both characters at their baseline level, Denzel is in this movie. He's a guy who took a bribe, was demoted, and then decides he is the best person to catch a criminal and takes a gun to go do it.
Because he wants to be in people's good graces again.
And the counterpoint is Travolta in the same thing is a guy who he went to prison for. He essentially just laundered money, right? Like
it was some sort of Wall Street bullshit.
Like for lack of a better term, he took a bribe. And he wants to be on top again, so he takes a gun. There's essentially the same situation. The characters react differently beyond that point, but at a baseline level, they're the same character type.
But I think also to maybe to pick holes in that point, You could also make the case that the movie is trying to distinguish the differences between the two guys, because yes, it sets them all up as the same. Travolta carries a gun into a subway from a man who was at the top, fell to the bottom, wants to work his way at top. Denzel, who's a guy who worked his way from the bottom, got to the top, took a bribe, fell to the bottom, has to work his way back up to the top, but still has high goals, grabs a gun, goes after Travolta. But what's the difference? That in that standoff on the bridge,
he doesn't want to shoot, but he does.
No, that's what I'm saying. This is where the movie could have made a side turn, is that he has a gun aimed at Travolta, and the Travolta says, you're going to shoot me, or I'm going to kill you. Travolta pulls the gun, and Denzel doesn't shoot him. And instead, Denzel gets shot. Maybe he dies. Maybe he just gets wounded. And then the cops kill Travolta. And the movie ends with us knowing that, yes, these two guys started from similar circumstances, but they don't have to go down the same path.
That's your version of an ending?
That's my version of the ending that it could have taken that would have made slightly more sense to me than Denzel just radically suddenly becoming a vigilante going after a guy.
But the movie wants to make the point at the end that they are the same guy.
Yeah.
And that's why it makes the choice.
But I don't think it did the work necessarily with Denzel's character to make me believe that.
Mm-hmm.
But I think that's because you're on board with Denzel.
Yeah, because the movie sets me up to be on board.
You're making assumptions about this character that I think the movie is trying to wants you to make.
Right.
But I'm saying that I think the movie, this is the Tony Scott rotten foundation thing, is that once you start pulling on this thread, does he have kids? Do we ever even see the kids? I don't think so.
We only see the wife.
He talks about the kids when it's convenient. The motorman, we skip past this, but the motorman running the train is someone that Denzel's character knows.
Mm-hmm.
He does have kids, by the way. He talked to his wife about it.
Denzel will bring him up once he gets shot as this is why I'm doing this. But he never seems that worked up about it. And you're not going to tell me that Denzel Washington is too bad of an actor to sell me on him caring that his friend is dead. He doesn't care that his friend is dead. He cares more that John Turturro is taking over his desk.
Yeah.
This is what I'm saying.
Yeah.
Is this movie works as a thriller?
It also works as an analysis of a thriller.
Yeah.
It works as a... Your face right now, it's so good. I love it.
No, this is all fine. I get it. I understand. It translated to me differently than it translated to you guys.
The key difference in this movie between A Fugitive or something is that The Fugitive puts the work in at the beginning to establish Harrison Ford is innocent and a good person. He's a doctor. Yes. This movie puts the opposite in at the beginning, where it's Denzel Washington is a questionable guy who does not have the training for this. And that is why, in The Fugitive, I have no problems being yeah, Harrison Ford's gonna get the one-armed man. He's gonna discover that Provasic is me.
I think it's telling that they keep on bringing up Catholicism.
Yes.
And not only do they keep on bringing up Catholicism, but that Travolta's fixated on the Catholic idea of that everyone's a sinner.
Yes, and
that
also that
life needs to be about repentance. And for Travolta, that's just his way of excusing the fact that he uses and abuses and kills people and is just willing to do whatever it takes. But again, if we take the fact that Travolta sees something of himself in Denzel, which is an idea this movie I think is taking pretty literally, then that becomes the question again of well, how has Denzel sinned? If you take Denzel, it's Walter's his character name. I'm terrible at character names. If you take Walter at face value, he's justified in everything he's doing, but I think the movie doesn't really back that up.
And I think a really interesting way this movie frames that, to go to with the Catholicism idea, is that very early in the movie, Travolta refers to the driver's cabin of the train. He's this could be a confessional. He just kind of says it offhandedly. And then the only times he's talking to Denzel, he's in that booth, and that's the only time he opens up about himself as a person, is in the confessional booth, in which he, tells Denzel a little bit about his past. And in some way, it's kind of the sinner and the priest relationship, except the priest is also a sinner. What makes Denzel justified to be on the other side of that confessional booth?
Can I talk about the very ending of this movie for a second?
I feel like we should just talk about the very ending as if we're at the very ending. Because
No, there's stuff in the middle I want to get to.
okay, I feel. How about this? Like, because I feel like we're gonna do this all episode. I feel like we should just
Talk about the movie.
Let's toss out the structure of plot points.
Yeah, that's great.
Let's just talk about the movie.
Yes.
Okay. So yeah, whatever you want to talk about the ending.
So I think the last couple of minutes of this movie rule.
Mm-hmm.
Because, so like we said, this movie ends
With
Travolta on the bridge, Denzel holding him at gunpoint, the cops closing in. Travolta basically, like my reading at least, is that he's so desperate to be in control that he's more willing to commit suicide by cop because that's something that he is actively doing.
Yeah, he's
than
making
to let
that
himself
choice.
get taken in. So he draws on Denzel and basically forces Denzel to shoot. Something that Denzel does without hesitation.
Mm-hmm.
The second Travolta's got his hand on his gun, he's down.
Yeah.
And then we get this beautiful shot of John Turturro in a helicopter saluting the corrupt MTA agents who just gunned down a man.
Mm-hmm.
The corrupt vigilante who
Yeah.
just gunned down a man is getting saluted by the police. And then there's this conversation between him and Gandolfini, where Gandolfini's basically like,
The city's going to have your
don't
back.
worry, we're going to take care of you. And again, if this is where I think it really clicks, because you're kind of expecting Denzel to like do the moral thing and be like, no, I'm going to. Did either of you guys see The Guilty?
No.
No,
The
the
Jake
Jake
Gyllenhaal
Gyllenhaal
movie?
I've not.
Okay,
The
I'm going to
Anton
briefly
Fuqua?
spoil The Guilty because rewatching this, I was like, oh, The Guilty is kind of just ripping off the Tony Scott taking
Yeah,
a
the
Pelham.
ending of this.
So The Guilty, for the uninitiated, it's a remake of a Dutch film, I want to say. It's a movie set entirely in a 911 dispatcher office.
Mm-hmm.
With Jake Gyllenhaal as a, disgraced cop who's under investigation for a shooting,
Yeah.
juggling phone calls to try to save this woman's life. And at the end of The Guilty, after having gone through everything, he decides, I'm going to throw myself at the mercy of the court and take responsibility for what bad things I've done,
Yeah.
even though I could totally walk clean because now I'm a hero cop. And when Denzel is presented with basically that same option, that Gandolfini says, hey, I can make this go away. Do you guys remember what Denzel does?
He smiles.
He just smiles and laughs and doesn't commit in either direction. And then this is telling. Gandolfini says, let me drive you home. And Denzel says, no, I'll take the train. It's faster. How is Gandolfini, the corrupt, image-obsessed cop, the mayor, introduced in this movie?
By saying the subway's faster than his car.
Because that matters more for PR.
Mm-hmm.
That's what matters, is what people think of you.
The present.
And taking the subway. And it is one scene where Denzel Washington talks to his beloved wife, played by Academy Award nominee Ingenue Ellis, in a very thankless role. She asks him to get a gallon of milk.
Mm-hmm.
And what does Denzel do?
I'll get a half gallon.
Movie? He gets her a half gallon. He's splitting the difference between the good guy and the piece of shit right to the very end of this movie.
I love it.
This is the best fucking movie ever made.
Am I gonna knock this up another half star?
Am I gonna knock this up? Well, the problem is, I mean, if I'm getting critical here, the problem is, and yes, Stuart, I agree with you. Once Denzel Washington goes into action hero mode, I think this movie is intellectually interesting, but it is kind of boring. The third act of Denzel and Travolta running around in the subway tunnels is long and dull.
There's not much to it.
No.
A lot of it's just because it spends so much time of just them running from place to place.
Ugh. And kind of like identical place to place.
And there's like a kind of a car chase. Like you could cut a fair bit of this off and just like have, it's the same thing with like, I'm trying to think of another movie that does a similar ending to this, where it comes down to just like the two people chasing each other. but like kind of streamlines it and does it quick. Whereas this is like,
Blowout.
all right,
Heat.
they're in
Blowout. Heat.
They're in the subway, then they're on the street, and then they're in the cars, and then they're on the bridge, and then they're on the lower section of the bridge, and every bit of it, nothing. There's no like sub interactions. There's not much excitement. It's just
And I'll add something more to that as well, which is like, first off, Cole, I agree with you and everything in terms of all this work that the movie is doing in terms of setting up the convolution between those two characters before the Denzel vigilante shift.
yeah.
Because then from the Denzel vigilante shift up until the standoff, it isn't paying off any of that work it did for itself.
Mm-hmm.
And you could say, well, but it's not hurting the work it did for itself. And I would agree to that. But it's not taking any of that work it did in that first, like, this movie's what, an hour and a half, hour 45?
Hour and 50, I think.
Hour and 50. It's not doing
hour 46.
It's not doing the work it did in the first hour 20 minutes and then putting all those pieces. Okay, I'm about to pull up a real weird reference into this. Harry Potter and the Deathly Hallows Part 2. Okay,
Yes.
You ready? So after Harry kills one of the Horcruxes in the Room of Requirements, and then he has to find the snake, and literally, like, they find out where Voldemort's going to be. It's going to be at the cottage below, like, the grounds. And then it just does this, like, sequence of them running through Hogwarts to get there. And you could say, oh, yeah, it's a scene of just them running to get to where they got to do, and they got to dodge all the battle and stuff. But what is implanted in all those little moments is all of the movies beforehand.
Because the first thing they encounter is a troll. And then they encounter the spiders.
And there's a werewolf. It goes through all of that. And what that sequence is doing is it's actually paying off the work that it had done. Granted, this is a franchise 8 movies long, but I'm saying with this chase scene is it's not doing that. It is not taking the work that it did all beforehand. Like, you could say, like, and like, well, actually, there's one bit I will give it credit to, and that is Denzel steals a car. He's like trying to do the right thing by going after John Travolta, but to do that, he has to commit Grand Theft Auto, which I think is, to your point, Cole, is kind of interesting. But I feel like nothing else is really being done with this scene, and it makes it boring, and it makes it like, what am I watching here? This is a sudden shift. Whereas I feel like you could keep this the exact same scene. You don't have to change much, but just implant those moments that it had been setting up before.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I guess this is my, like, Tony Scott master of subtext, rotten foundation thing, is that, like, I agree. It is not doing that because I think, at least from my reading, it has done that already, and to restate that would to be, at least I think maybe the movie would feel like that would be hitting it a little too hard.
Mm-hmm.
That it wants to work as an action movie so that you can kind of have a bad taste in your mouth after. Can I briefly tangent because you said something? That means I have to then say something, Jeff. Jeff, speaking of, do you remember how good movies used to look?
Yes.
This movie came out June 12th, 2009.
I think I know what you're about to say came out the same weekend.
Did not come out the same weekend.
Oh, but the same month.
Came out a month later. Harry Potter and the
Half-Blood Prince, shot by Bruno Delvanel.
Summer movies used to look like this.
They used to look great.
Movies used to look incredible.
And this movie does look really good.
This movie looks insane. I mean, every Tony Scott movie looks insane. It's bug nuts that he shot this on film.
Super 35.
Like, it actually hurts my brain. It would have been so much easier for him to shoot it digitally and get the exact same look.
But he committed. And I think it pays off in the color.
My problem as a digital fetishist, which I think Jeff knows I'm a hardline digital fetishist. The problem with most digital cinematography is it wants to look like celluloid, and it's kind of just a pale imitation. Tony Scott is weirdly the opposite. He wants to make film look like digital.
Yes, because it's a very digital looking movie.
Mm-hmm.
Well, because he is again, to make the Michael Mann connection. If Michael Mann's the guy who's like, what can we do with digital cinematography to make it its own distinct art form? Tony Scott's kind of the same with nonlinear editing.
Yeah.
That Tony Scott cuts movies in a way that is completely divorced from how you had to cut movies on a Studebaker. And that's why he's playing with like frame rate so much in this movie, and freezes and ramping. And
he's playing with frame rate, freezes, He's playing with text on screen.
On screen, hard cuts, a couple weird like fades to black just to like mess with the rhythm. Like swoop wipes. This is the same year as Speed Racer. This year after Speed Racer, but he's doing like a little bit of the you know what I'm talking about?
Yeah,
like
the Speed Racer
camera
thing.
Wipe that Speed Racer does a lot of, and that Scott Pilgrim's going to do the next year. He's doing that a couple times.
And there's the random times where like it zooms out from a character and then let's just keep zooming. It goes like a Google Maps view, and then it goes Grand Theft Auto 5 style when you're switching between a character and just goes.
Which I feel like we get a lot of movies these days that have like similar rhythms to this, but they feel so manufactured. And there's something about this isn't even like the most intense Scott film in this regard. You know, Domino and Man on Fire are the ones that are like
really
almost unwatchable at points, which I love. They're so intense, but it feels like a beating heart almost. It feels very human.
And the thing that this movie, going right to that point where you just said like movies after that have tried to do this, I think in regards to Travolta's career and where he's at this time, there's a very similar thing going on in this. Because I feel like most of Travolta's the next era of him. A lot of these movies, like, you know, From Paris with Love, The Forager, Killing Season, are trying to do the same thing as this movie with his character, where he's the heavy. Mm-hmm. He's like the bad guy in it. He's the tough guy with crazy mustaches and shit, where you want to, play that comparison between him and the hero. But none of these movies have the masterstroke of like a Tony Scott to really put the work in to make that happen. And instead you just get lazy John Travolta action performances.
And I think this is a perfect segue. We can keep talking about the plot. I'm not saying like we should segue into this section to get away from talking about the plot, but I do think this is a perfect segue into how did this movie do? And
can I briefly
how was it received and how much did it make?
Yeah.
Before we go into the segue on that, can I just say I actually think having gone through this whole journey, you two might be right to have this be the start of the Travolta exploitation.
You think so?
Period. Because to some degree, like you said, a lot of the movies that follow are trying to have Travolta be the heavy, but what this movie gets that those movies don't get, I'm assuming I haven't seen any of them, is that, again, Travolta is a loser.
Yeah, he's not a tough...
He's scary because he's so willing to kill people, but if he wasn't so trigger happy, he's just a Wall Street guy with a bad neck tattoo.
Yes.
Like, Travolta has passed the point in his career where he can be a credible threat as a bad guy or a good guy. Also, weird sidebar. I know it's a total coincidence. Really feels like Heath Ledger's Joker at points.
Yes.
In the way that he will like spout philosophical musings that kind of feel like the character is bullshitting just to bullshit.
Yeah.
Which we know Travolta's doing because there's the one bit where he's like, I have to pray to God. Yeah. And then he's just trying to buy time on his own.
Yeah.
With this stuff. Can I take a quick break to go take a leak? I'm sorry.
Yes.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Yes.
We've been doing this for like 2 hours.
Well, no, I mean, Jeff and I can keep going. So
okay. I'll be back in like 30 seconds.
You can go.
We will quickly talk about the aftermath.
Can I just say that I am so glad, even though whether we may have been right making this the beginning of the Travolta exploitation or maybe we've been wrong, whichever way, I'm glad this is the beginning.
Yes.
Just because of this conversation.
Yes.
I am so glad because like, if it wasn't this, then it was going to be what? From Paris with Love?
From Paris with Love.
And like, great. We would have talked about a movie that was like hard to follow. Yeah. It's pretty dumb.
We got to talk about that it's like his fireman pole.
We got to talk about a fireman pole?
Yeah, Travolta when he goes down the fireman pole in that movie. Your audiences will hear it in 2 weeks.
I don't remember that happening in the movie. Anyway, but like I'm very glad that this is the segue movie.
Yes.
This is the kickoff to this Travolta exploitation. We're kicking off with like as Cole would say, a masterpiece, or what audiences and critics say is pretty lukewarm. Mm-hmm. Which is why I want to get to that segue, because I think we're all making really good points here, and we're all talking about what this movie was able to accomplish in the time and what other movies are trying to replicate but failing.
Yeah.
So then let's talk about
This
that.
is a movie that feels ahead of its time.
And was it received like it was ahead of its time?
No. We'll quickly talk about the reception of this movie, but there are still some things in the actual movie I want to talk about. Do we want to do that now, or do we want to?
I mean, I was just saying we could talk about how it did and how it was received, and then we can go back to the plot. But like, just because I think we're in like that perfect segue moment.
Yeah.
But
What's y'all's longest episode?
well, right now we're in 2 hours and 15 minutes, and I think
We're gonna blow past it.
Yeah,
hold on. Keep talking. I'll look at what your longest episode is.
Well,
I think it's
Pulp Fiction.
Pulp Fiction, maybe.
I think it's Pulp Fiction. Yeah.
I think Becca beat someone by like 1 minute in that episode.
Something like that, yeah.
Hey Becca, you hear that?
Because Pulp Fiction is like 2 hours and 24.
Can we talk about how we just put out a 92-minute episode this week that we're recording? We put out Bolt. Bolt is in and out. Bolt is like the length of the movie. A crisp in and out.
Yeah, whereas we've already exceeded the runtime. Yeah, 2 hours and 24 minutes. I was right.
You're gonna cut out all the times we're talking about how long this has been, right?
No, we cut nothing.
No,
we have never cut a single thing on this show.
We don't cut anything out.
Okay, we've only cut one thing, and it's when I said the name of a person who I shouldn't have said.
Oh yeah, I think I remember that.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah, I mouthed it to him.
All right.
That's the only time. Okay, so
okay.
I think
Pulp Fiction's the longest. We're definitely blowing past that.
Pulp Fiction's like 2 hours 23. This is Swordfish is 2 hours 20. So you're gonna blow past Swordfish.
What was Swordfish?
220.
And Pulp Fiction was 224.
Yeah.
So you have about maybe like 20, 30 more minutes to go.
23. I'm saying like 15.
We're at 2 hours and like we're almost right at like 2 hours.
Okay.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Gotcha. Okay. Well, anyway.
Well, Jeff still wants to talk about the movie.
Yes, I still want to stuff.
We're not going to... I don't think we can talk
about
plot
when we started going plot
point.
points, we got 5 minutes in and then gave up.
Pretty much.
Okay. Well, Jeff, what do you want to say?
Well, I wanted to talk about Travolta's character in this, being a Wall Street guy, and how the movie is clever in the way it sets up elements of that early on. Like, right away, he does that thing where, like, Denzel's like, how much money do you want for these guys? And he's like, he says, this is a spot trade, not a futures transaction. So we're doing it person by person. And he gives them a specific, he's like, each person's worth this amount of money. Now times it by 9. How much money do I want?
And
it's 10 million and 1 cent. And he says he keeps the 1 cent as a broker's fee. I don't know why. I just think that like those elements setting up early on pay off later when it's like, because they kind of do just throw in that Travolta's a Wall Street guy. It's just Gandolfini's like, who would think of that? Ugh, a Wall Street guy.
I love the bit where they tell Gandolfini that it's 10 million, and Gandolfini's flunky is like, of course it's 10 million. This guy's smart. He knows that that's the most money we can get at a moment's notice.
Yes.
There's this whole thing where they break down that, like, I don't know if this is true or not, but the city of New York can, in a crisis, get $10 million in cash basically immediately as a loan. And Gandolfini's like, I didn't fucking know that. Why do you know that? Why does he know that? And I love that idea because, again, it's working on two levels. Travolta's smart. He knows what the most amount of money he can get at a moment's notice from the city is. But Travolta's also dumb because he thinks he's a big shot.
And he thinks he can get that. But
he's not, because the actual big shots don't give a shit about that level of like petty machinations.
Yeah.
I mean,
because real power.
He's playing the Robin Hood stonks game during this heist by checking his like gold.
Power isn't fucking GameStop stocks.
Right.
It's having the NYPD at your beck and call.
Yeah.
That's what actual power is, and that's what Travolta wants.
That's what this movie is saying what power is. That's what this movie is saying what power is. Yeah. Because I'm sure this movie could spin a whole other direction and say that while John Travolta's a stocks bro, basically checking his GameStop's like stuff and NASDAQ and how him doing this whole train hijack thing is actually making him billions. Real talk.
Isn't some like idiot trying to make a Robin Hood GameStop movie?
Yes, I think 3 people, one of them being Adam McKay, have optioned.
Can we please put John Travolta in that movie.
Yeah,
Can we please-
Travolta in the fucking McKay
Can we-
one. He'll
can
get
we-
an Oscar
can we
now.
please
Oh
have-
my God, Travolta in a McKay.
Can we
movie.
please have the whole
That's
movie?
actually that was a joke. That's the best thing that could happen to his career right now.
Yes.
Travolta in a McKay movie?
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
I just really want to see a movie in which John Travolta's sitting, like, laying on a couch, just, like, on Robin Hood, refreshing his stonks.
That could be like the Big Short Margot Robbie bit,
Yeah.
where it's like literally it's like.
No, I want him to be the main character.
Yeah, no,
Well, I was thinking that.
he's
No.
Steve Carell in
I
the
agree.
Big
I agree. I was thinking that too. But like, if he couldn't be the main character, I would settle for that. Of just like literally a bit where John Travolta's on the couch scrolling on Robin Hood and be like, "So you want to know about Robin Hood? So here's like that's literally all we get." Like John Travolta McKay. But I also agree. I want him to be a main character in a McKay movie.
Because that's the type of role he should be playing, is like the kind of aloof idiot who thinks he's like above the who thinks he's high status but is not.
Right, because he's gonna lose all of his GameStop stuff.
Yeah, because every movie where we've had him play, he plays this archetype a lot that this movie is more subtextually
What
having him
was
play.
the last real movie he was in?
Gotti, obviously.
No.
No.
No, in terms of real,
You're breaking your promise. You're not supposed to talk about that movie on the podcast.
the closer we got, I've gotten a little okay. with sprinkling it in.
I have never seen Gotti, listeners, dear listeners of Travolting.
Okay.
How many do you guys average?
So we haven't checked in a little bit. We've had quite a few people telling us they've been listening recently.
Quite a few of you Travolting listeners. I just want this on the record. I have never seen Gotti, and I never will.
So
We'll see about that.
I just wanted to respond to like what was his last movie. I do want to clarify and maybe
Real movie.
Well, not even just
I-
that. I want to say what's the most real role he's done, and that's Robert Shapiro in American Crime Story.
That would actually be.
It's not a movie;
That's what
it's a
the answer I
mini
was
series, but like it's the most recent like real
Thing
thing
he's
he's done.
If you're talking just movies, I honestly think the closest you come to that is Savages.
It is Savages, and no, it is American Crime Story. No, that's exactly what I was looking for. It is actually
Adele Dazeem.
like the actual death knell of John Travolta's career, and I'm sorry to you too, is that American Crime Story did not move the needle for him at all.
Yeah.
When it moved the needle for other people.
Yeah,
Like it did, like it. That's kind of the thing that made Ryan Murphy like a serious deal.
what?
In
That's what
American
made
Horror
Sterling
Story
K.
was
Brown
before
No,
that.
but the
a
thing
big
is,
guy.
American Horror Story is a horror TV show that like can be dismissed as a horror TV show. The OJ show, everyone's like, this is serious. Ryan Murphy's a serious director now.
Stuart, Jeff doesn't know anything about Ryan Murphy.
I don't.
It was a dumb thing he said. Let him take the L.
Wait.
It's okay.
What did I
We're
say?
gonna fix it.
Yeah.
I'm announcing it here.
Oh God,
Yeah.
no! He's
Mike,
no.
You just said you're not cutting anything. Me and Jeff Sweeney will be doing a podcast in which we watch and review every episode of the television program Glee.
I did accidentally agree to do a Glee podcast with Cole, in which we watch every single episode of the television series Glee. That did happen.
And it's on mic now, so you can't back out.
Stuart is removing his headphones. Yeah. So, American Crime Story is the answer to that. Okay. So let's talk about John Turturro in this movie.
He's good. He's good.
He's
like,
very good.
like he's the exact opposite of Gandolfini for me, where he's also like could just show up, but he's really like he's putting in the work.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, John. It's that period of Turturro where he's just he's always just popping up and stuff.
Yeah.
That was just a segue to try and get out of the Glee conversation.
And
We're
you
also
bring
going
it
to
back
watch every
up.
episode of the Glee Project.
Mhm. Yes.
Jeff's cheating on me.
Also, I do want to talk about the segment of the movie where the cops are trying to get
One second.
Yeah.
Who's recording these episodes for you?
I don't know. TBD. You probably sitting there silently in a corner.
Think again, Buckaroo.
Yeah, Stuart, in case you didn't hear, we are doing the Glee podcast, and you have to be a part of it, but you're not allowed to speak during the episode.
Find your own sound engineer. I will not be attending.
Okay. So
They'll be short.
But before we get to the aftermath of this movie, I do want to talk about the part where the cops are trying to get the money to the train station.
Yeah, that was a bit. That was a good bit.
It's and I love that the movie points out the stupidity of what they're doing, because like realistically they should just put it in a helicopter and fly it there, right? That's like what probably would realistically happen. But the movie, that's not dramatic. So the movie needs them to drive it. So the cops put it in a cop car. They get like 8 bikes and they're just like driving it down the streets. Gandolfini's like, why didn't they put it in a helicopter, huh?
And they all just look at him silently, which I think was the best moment ever, because none of them had a good answer.
Yeah. Well, it's because
I do have the answer for that, though.
Yes.
So once again, it's brute force. It's real power.
Yeah. Is that
real power isn't thinking smart. It's that you can just do it anyway.
Yeah. That you can send. Because
it doesn't matter that it ultimately doesn't matter that they lose the money.
Mm-hmm.
If you assume that they don't care about the lives of the people on the train, because they don't.
Going along with that brute force idea, I like that the squad cars, like, they destroy a taxi, probably kill somebody, and just keep going. Mm-hmm. And like even the squad car flips over and 2 cops are pulled out like bloody and dying, and the rest of the cops just grab the money, put it on a bike, and keep going. Like, it's just going along with that like brute force, like who's real moral in this situation? Like, this money's going to save lives, but how many lives is it going to destroy on the way? You know?
Yeah.
Because it's about the PR.
Yeah.
It's not about saving the people on the train. It's about diffusing the crisis.
Yes.
Those seem like they're the same thing, but they're not actually the same thing. I also love that when we do get the final car crash, it is the wildest car crash of all time, because Tony Scott rules. Like, Tony Scott's been like, you've been watching. Here's my gift to you for watching 2 people have a phone call for the last 45 minutes. I'm going to have a car get T-boned by a truck, flip like 100 feet in the air off a bridge, and then land on another car.
It looks like something out of Ambulance.
Jeff,
I had to bring it up.
Can we briefly Ambulance sidebar?
Let's talk about Ambulance.
Michael Bay is making a car chase movie.
Yes.
How cool is that?
It's so good. No, he's not.
Okay, that was the ambulance.
He's not just making a car chase movie. He's making an ambulance chase movie.
All right, that was the ambulance. Stuart looks ecstatic that this conversation is still going.
All right, so
Cole, I do want to actually say, when you stepped away for a second, Stuart actually was talking about how glad he is that this is the beginning of this new era, because this is a great conversation to start things off with.
Listeners, I have requested to be on 2 future late period Travolta episodes.
He's coming back. I don't think those episodes will be quite as long, because I don't know how long we could talk about those movies.
Well, one of them, actually both of them, I need to like hold a clinic on the complete career of the director.
Yeah.
And why they're important.
Wait, which other ones are you on for?
I'll tell you off mic.
Okay.
We've got one of them hasn't come out yet, and it's questionable whether it's going to make it in time.
Oh, Paradise City?
Yeah.
So, Paradise City, audiences, we do want to say right now, Paradise City is a movie that has been shot. It was filmed over 2 weeks in Hawaii, starring Bruce Willis and John Travolta. Have heard nothing about it since May of last year. We promise, whether it comes out during this run or whether it comes out in 3 years, we will come back and talk about that movie.
And I have dibs.
And Cole will be there. You have our solemn promise. Okay.
How'd this movie do?
Okay.
How'd
this movie do?
Okay. So this movie comes out. Comes out June 12th of 2009. The year of our Lord. And it doesn't do great. Doesn't do terrible. It does.
People hate it.
Yes.
Like that. Let's be very clear. People hate this movie.
I mean, in a financial sense, it didn't do great, didn't do terrible.
Well, what was its budget and what did it make?
So it was $100 million budget, which is the last time that's ever going to happen for Travolta.
Yeah.
And then it comes out and it makes $150 million. So like it makes, for lack of a better term, it makes its budget back, but it doesn't really make its budget back.
Because of marketing.
Times 4, Jeff. You know that. Times 4.
Yeah, times 4. So it doesn't. It makes its budget back in a quote sense for like the general person to look at it, but in terms, it loses the studio money.
Mm-hmm.
Listeners, for those of you who don't know how movies work, this always bothers me, so I want to get this on the record. If you see a movie's listed budget, the quick way to determine what the actual break-even point is to multiply the listed budget by 4.
Yes.
Because generally, especially from a movie of this scale, they're going to spend an equal amount of money on marketing, and then everyone forgets, but studios only get
half the money.
Half of the box office gross.
Because the rest goes to the theaters.
So when you see a movie that cost 100 and made 150, that is a flop.
Well, it's all its opening night, right? Because the percentages differ over time.
Now it's its opening night. 2009, not so much.
Yeah.
This movie debuted at number 3. It was. I found the movie.
Can we play the box office game?
Cole, do you want to guess what beat this movie?
This is 2009, but this is mid-June. Iron Man 2 comes out the next year.
Yes, Iron Man 2 is 2010.
Wolverine is Wolverine still hanging around?
I don't have the full box office, but it is not one of the top 2.
Okay. Yeah, I can't remember. 09.
The films
Monsters vs. Aliens?
No.
That's probably lower too. That's like 3 weeks old at this point.
The films that beat the Taking of Pelham 1, 2, 3 at the box office are The Hangover, which is on its second weekend, and Up. Disney Pixar's Up, which is on its second weekend as well.
So this movie did not beat 2 movies on its second weekend.
Yes. I think Up is
What
actually...
did it open against? I mean, what were the other movies that opened?
I'm trying... I need to bring up box office. Mojo, June 12th, 2009. The audience is thrilled to hear me say my Google search history.
This episode's been really short, Jeff. We really need to
we really got spruce
pad it out.
Okay, so I found the list. I found the box office listing of this week, but I can't find what came out that day.
Hold on.
Movie. I'm just gonna say movies came out June 12th, 2009. It's telling me Moonfall, Blacklight, and My Best Friend Anne Frank. None of these. No.
Wow, good for my friend Anne Frank making it onto that list.
These movies come out this weekend. Why is it listing them for Friday, June 12th?
Hold on, I got it. I'm going to answer my own question in a second.
Oh, yeah. Okay. But anyway, the top 3 at the box office are The Hangover, Up, Taking Pelham coming in number 3, and then behind it is Night at the Museum, Battle of the Smithsonian, and Land of the Lost, starring Will Ferrell.
This movie opens against nothing, it looks like.
Okay, it was just this.
Everything else that opens this weekend opens limited. It opens against Dead Snow and Moon, but those are both opened limited.
Okay.
So this is the dead week in between The Hangover and The Proposal.
Okay.
This should have done better than 3.
Yes, this was...
I'm just saying. It's a Denzel movie.
It's a Denzel Travolta, Tony Scott film.
And it's an action movie.
Yes.
It should have a clear lane to itself.
Now, what this movie does do decent financially is it's a good home video seller.
Not surprised.
This movie makes $14.1 million and sells 919,000 DVD units in its first week of DVD release, which is unheard of nowadays. Just obviously.
Yeah.
But that is a decent haul. It obviously doesn't push it past where it needs to be, but it helps, kind of cushion the fall a little bit.
How much is... Hold on, I'm looking something up. This is riveting audio.
But critical wise, how did it do?
Critically wise, this movie generally just comes out and immediately gets compared to the original 1974 film.
Sure, of course.
And audiences, it gets that kind of like, why do we need this reaction?
And we talked about this a little bit with Mad City, where it's like Mad City is a victim of comparison for all the...
Because everyone's just like, we've seen this movie before. It's called Dog Day Afternoon.
Yeah.
Why are we seeing it again?
Right. And, I mean, if there's one thing we've learned on this podcast, it's that maybe movies shouldn't be so much as punished for that point.
Yeah. Because this is an interesting reinvention of the original movie. It's not just redoing it again.
Yeah.
It has commentary to say on that movie.
This is to me like the text, like this movie or not. My problem with people who don't like this movie is that I've never met someone whose complaint about this movie is not primarily rooted in it's not the Walter Matthau, Robert Shaw version, which is also it's a wonderful movie, but it's a very different movie. This to me, love it or hate it, is the textbook example of what a remake should be.
Yeah. Because
this movie is just remaking the idea.
Mm-hmm.
It is such a wildly different
story
interpretation.
Yes.
And I've never read the book, but my understanding is that this is much more in line. It's not like this is more of an adaptation of the book type deal.
It's just a different interpretation of the story.
It's the same basic. It is not even the story, the idea of the story, which is train hijack city, low-level city employee has to be the hero.
Yes.
That's what remake should be, is just take the nugget and just do your own thing. And the problem is people get hung up on wanting to be Fidelitous and then being upset when something is Fidelitous.
Yes. I do want to say, you know how you know this movie's good?
Because Tony Scott does a watch the movie?
Armand White was critical of it. That's how you know it's good. Armand White said Tony Scott's craft cannot create suspense. It substitutes noise, cursing, and brutality.
I agree with every word he said there. I do not think this movie is suspenseful in the slightest, nor do I think it wants to be.
So you agree with Armand White's point, but not his... You agree with Armand White's words, not his point.
Not his conclusion.
Not his conclusion.
Yeah, I agree with his point, not his conclusion.
Which is, I think, what a lot of this episode has been.
Yeah.
You like that? Yeah. I'm bringing it back around.
Stuart looks like he's going to fucking murder me.
No, I mean, if we're getting into closing thoughts, I guess I should say that I obviously didn't put all of that legwork into my perception of this movie as I was watching it. I mean, I was watching this as more of like, it's kind of, whether it's fortunate or unfortunate, sort of how I watch all of John Travolta's movies, especially nowadays, where it's like, I watch it and I get some interesting tidbits about it. I spot some cool little nuggets here and there, but ultimately I'm seeing a guy I've seen for so long now, and I'm just sort of like comparing it to all of his work he's done before. And, I guess in terms of this movie in particular, I saw this more as a Denzel vehicle with, Travolta doing well. I want to make that very clear for the record, that you guys have talked a lot about what you love about this movie. I've not been super vocal, and I'm not saying I disagree with all your points. Like I agree with a good fair of them, but something I do want to be very vocal about is I do like Travolta's performance in this movie.
He's good.
He's really good in this movie.
He's very good.
This is one of my 5 favorite Travolta performances.
I would say performance-wise, yes, it is going to be, maybe not top 5, but
it's up there.
It's up there. It's definitely up there for me. And
it's one of the few performances that understand. Like, I think it was almost one of our first episodes.
Yes, I know what you're about to say.
Moment.
I know what you're about to say.
Moment by moment, Lily Tomlin gave this really profound quote about John Travolta. And Cole, you pretty much echoed what she said, probably inadvertently, that all of his performances are a facet of masculinity.
Well, and it's also a high wire, a balancing duality of so many different things, whether it's feminine and masculinity, or whether it's confidence versus cowardice, whether it's strength versus weak. Like John Travolta knows how to ride that line in a character. He knows how to tiptoe it on one end where you're not quite sure, like the aloofness, that confidence versus that not so sure nature. And so to bring that back, I agree. Then I think that Tony Scott knew how to use Travolta in this movie very well. He's utilized very well in this movie.
Yes.
Travolta also sounds incredible in this movie. I wanted to give a shout out because, like, obviously he has a high voice in general, but he's like kicking it even higher. In this one, and it's very like snivelly and shrill, and like it's a very smart choice on his behalf to, in a movie where a lot of it is going to be reaction shots of people listening to him, to like make his voice distinct. What Travolta normally sounds like.
Something that we don't really talk about this that much. It's like Travolta's impressions.
His voices.
Travolta does a fair number of voices in his work, and we've commented that a lot of those are very poor Southern accents.
He usually just defaults to the Southern accent.
He does good Brooklyn accents, good New York accents.
Wait, he does good Brooklyn accents? I don't know about that. Let me tell you something.
He does good, like Midwest.
When has he played Brooklyn?
Gotti?
Well, I mean, doesn't he play Brooklyn in Saturday Night Fever?
Oh,
no.
Yeah, he's playing.
Sorry, I blew out the mic.
Yeah, you blew out the mic. Yeah.
He's Jersey.
No, he's Brooklyn.
He's from no, because he's across the bridge.
Oh, shit. Oh, is he really Jersey?
Is he not? The non-existent person he's supposed to be playing, who allegedly existed in real life but does not exist in real life, was from New Jersey. Well, I feel like you guys didn't say that on your Saturday Night Fever episode.
That it wasn't a real person. Oh no, he is from Brooklyn. He's from Brooklyn, and
he is. Shit,
Tony Manero.
That's what I've been fucking saying.
Sorry, I thought he was Jersey. I apologize for yelling into the mic.
I knew he was Brooklyn.
Stuart, I take back every time I've disagreed with you this whole episode.
Great, amazing, including the hair ranking. Including the hair ranking, right? Including the hair ranking.
I mean, I'm not arguing with the canon correct list.
Shut the fuck up. This will not stand. I will file a formal complaint. But no, with the impression bit that I wanted to finish, a lot of his impressions seem to be in the mid to attempted lower register.
Yeah.
And what I mean by that is Travolta naturally has a higher register voice. And so for him trying to sound like a deep, low voice, it doesn't really... Like, I never really catch it because it's always just reads as middle register. Like Edna Turnblad, he's just talking with...
Let me tell you something.
Well, that's what I mean. It's like, is that real? That's
almost not... Dr. Evil.
That was good.
Well, he's not talking with like...
I'm from Philly. I can do it.
So I watched Don't Look Up, which annoyingly got nominated for Best Picture. Makes me want to hate that movie. The movie wasn't terrible, but it doesn't deserve movies that. I literally just armed Cole. I activated him.
Sorry, I just need to clarify something real quick. That movie is in fact terrible. Go on.
I didn't think it was terrible. I didn't think it was
the listener home
a masterpiece.
On the screen that we were looking at Colin, he went from like casual, like we're on hour 2 of recording this podcast mode, to like a nuke ready to launch right up to the mic.
Sorry, just want to once again correct Stuart there. Don't Look Up is terrible.
But like, okay, so Mark Rylance plays basically a combination between like Tim Cook and Steve Jobs.
I forget where this started. Where did this conversation start?
Travolta's
Why are we talking
accents.
about Mark Rylance?
Travolta's accents. Hear me out on this. I can finish a point. Unlike you guys. Anyway. So, no, like Mark Rylance does like a voice where he's talking like this, like a really like high-pitched voice. And I really wonder if John Travolta got put into a role where the role called for like a high-pitched tone accent. A true high pitch. I'm not talking about Edna Turnblad, because in Edna Turnblad, he's talking like how a woman with a deep voice would talk.
From Baltimore.
From Baltimore. I'm talking about John Travolta playing... I don't know what role...
I hopped down from that cloud real fast.
Well, I'm talking about a role where Travolta has to... He normally talks in a register like this. Like this is his normal like register, but he
that's just fantastic.
raises it
That's
up
just
to like a
I can't do it.
this type of like a like a register, and he has to really channel that breathiness. Like, I wonder what, because he can do it. I know he can do it because that's where his register normally lies.
Yeah.
So that was my point.
Okay.
Is I want to see Travolta do like an accent that's high pitch and tone.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I think this is the highest I've ever heard him go.
But it's more
what I
of
was
like
trying to say.
stressed out, angry, high pitch. Like, this is it's my best like John Travolta angry impression. But like, look at it, like from Phenomenon.
Mm-hmm.
Like that's the type of high pitch he's
Remember
doing.
the trees and anyway.
No.
Do we want to go right to closing thoughts?
I gave mine.
You gave your closing.
I
thoughts.
gave mine. Travolta's great in this. It's mostly a Denzel vehicle, but Travolta delivers a really good performance. And I feel like the movie does have a point to it, but I don't agree with particularly how it tries to deliver that in the third act.
Yeah.
Those are my final thoughts.
Cool. Any final thoughts on this movie? Closing opinions.
I will admit that when I came on here at the start of this and said that this was the best John Travolta movie, I was being a little bit just provocative, just trying to push buttons. And having talked about this movie now for how long have we been going?
I'm pretty sure we're at 2:20.
Having talked about this movie for 2 hours and 20 minutes, I am now being 100% earnest when I say that this is the best John Travolta movie. Tony Scott was a legend. There will never be anyone like him.
True King.
Jeff?
My closing thoughts are, I mean, pretty much I feel like I said everything I liked about this movie during that episode. I went into this being like, all right, it's going to be probably a pretty good action movie, and I came out really enthused by this movie. This movie really had me during the proceedings. I hadn't seen it before, and it really drew me in. The mismatch between, I always love a good like crime story about, like a cop and a criminal, not so different, you and I. But I really appreciated this movie's commitment to exploring that idea beyond the basic like baseline levels. Mm-hmm. And also just this movie looks so fucking good. This movie looks so good.
Yeah, I forgot to say that at my closing.
I kept forgetting, I kept being like, wow, how is he doing this? Like, it'll be like 6 quick fire shots that you only see once, and they're all like crazy dolly track moves. And I'm like, how do you accomplish this? Like, how many cameras do you have? Like, Ridley Scott shoots with like 15 cameras at a time.
Yeah, and Ridley Scott's movies look like dog shit.
And does Tony, I just am in awe of his level of craft.
And he shot this on Super 35.
Yeah. He shot this on film. That must have taken so much time.
It must have taken so much fucking time. Oh, one last thing that I meant to bring up earlier and I didn't mean to bring up is I really love this movie's visual motif where Travolta is almost always obscured by something.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of times he's shot through a window.
Yeah.
But he's always there's always something in between him and the lens, whereas Denzel is always kind of free floating, but the camera won't stop moving when it's on Denzel.
Mm-hmm.
And it's very locked in place when it's on Travolta.
Yeah.
And
which I think is a great visual, that's embodiment of the trust issues this movie is invoking in the spectator.
Yeah. That's very hounded home at the final standoff scene.
Yeah.
Because Denzel's in a clean frame, but it's moving. I think it's handheld. Whereas Travolta's on a locked off tripod, but it's behind a fence.
Yeah.
So, yeah. Cool.
Hell yeah.
This is great, guys.
This was actually, this was a really good conversation.
I mean, yeah, to sort of fill that point in that Jeff told you earlier, Cole, I did say that, whether we were right or wrong in making this the beginning of the Travolta exploitation era, I am happy, though, that this was the beginning, just because otherwise the first episode of Travolta exploitation would have been us talking about From Paris with Love. And I'm going to tell you this now.
I don't have much to say about that.
I don't have much to say about it. I don't remember half that movie.
I can invent a take on it if you need.
Just coming to pretend to have opinions.
Yeah, but just I'm glad that the first movie in Travolta exploitation is something that carries
has some juice to it.
Has some juice
and also
to it.
Maybe your longest episode.
You might make it. Remember when Sam really thought he made it? And we missed it by 4 minutes.
Wait, how much longer do we have to go?
It's really I think we're there. I think we're at 2/3.
Hey Jeff, what do you think about The Last Jedi?
So, I can fill this out by
so-
explaining why we think we're still there because the Zoom.
No, don't worry about it. Don't worry about it. This is bad audio.
It records
you should cut
yes.
this.
No, we're not cutting anything. No cuts. Stuart doesn't like to edit.
So I don't like to edit. I have a full-time
Yeah.
job. This is a hobby. So yeah, thank you.
Stuart.
This is a great conversation.
No, guys, this was incredible. This is so much fun. Thank you so much.
This was a really good time. Cole, thank you so much for coming on.
Yeah.
I've really been looking forward to having you on because
We had this conversation over a year ago.
Yeah, we did. So when I've said a lot, like the 5 or 6 people I reached out to first, Cole was on that list, and now a year later we've knocked out like 4 of the ones that asked me like a year ago in the past few weeks. So we're finally we're finally paying our debts.
We have
Well, now you're finally in the good movies.
Life on a Line's coming. That's gonna be a 5-minute episode. He gets on an electrical wire. A storm comes. He comes down.
Yeah.
All right.
Well,
if there's nothing else anyone has to say, I will wrap us up and say thank you all for listening to this episode of Travolting. Make sure to tune in next week for our episode on the one and only Old Dogs. An episode we definitely didn't record 2 months ago. You can, as always, please remember to rate, review, subscribe on whatever platforms you're listening on. As a reminder, we are available on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, and YouTube. You can follow us on Twitter or Instagram at TravoltingPod. Email us any comments or questions, travoltingpodcast@gmail.com. Pop into our Reddit, r/Travolting. You'd be the first. You can find me on Twitter at Jeff W. Sweeney.
find me on Instagram at StuartElmore95.
Cole, anything to plug?
Absolutely not.
Special thanks, as always, to Rebecca Johnson for our graphic design and Michael Van
We love you,
Bodingen-Smith.
Becca.
Michael Van Bodingen-Smith for this new theme music that is now taking you out. I hope you guys enjoy this new theme. Michael worked hard on it, and I'm very fond of it.
Bye.
Bye.